So let's look at the purpose statement of Rule 16, and then we'll look at some definitions. Rule 16 covers when and how a player may take free relief by playing a ball from a different place, such as when there is interference by an abnormal course condition or a dangerous animal condition. These conditions are not treated as part of the challenge of playing the course, and free relief is generally allowed. That's a consistent statement throughout the rules. Anytime you see the purpose statement that says this is not part of the challenge of playing the game, or it is part of the challenge of playing the game, that should tip off. If it's not part of the challenge, you're going to get relief of some sort. If it is part of the challenge of playing the game, then you got to step up and take the challenge and play it as it lies. All right, definitions. Let's start with these. This is going to take us quite a while. There are a number of definitions. Once we go through the definitions, then the actual rule itself is fairly straightforward, but it is the definitions that are very detailed. So the first one is abnormal course conditions on page 326. Abnormal course condition. Understand that this is an umbrella term and it covers 4 defined conditions: animal holes, ground under repair, immovable obstructions, or temporary water. So under Rule 16, we continually use the word abnormal course condition. It can be any of these 4. Second definition is animal. Any living member of the animal kingdom other than humans, including, and that includes everything. So when you talk about an animal, it's everything other than human beings. Animal hole. Your first reaction might be that an animal hole is every hole made by an animal, but that's not correct because the rules often define things because they want to get to a certain outcome. So look at the definition of animal hole. Any hole dug in the ground by an animal, except for holes dug by animals that are also defined as loose impediments, such as worms or insects. The term animal hole includes the loose materials the animal digs out, any worn down track, or any area on the ground pushed up or altered as a result of the animal digging the hole underground. That last sentence deals with what you normally consider mole holes, where the ground is pushed up, and you can see that. An animal hole does not include animal footprints that are not part of a worn down track or trail leading to an animal hole. So, question, your ball is on the fringe. On the fringe also is an anthill and a gopher hole. And you are standing on an anthill and then you're standing on the gopher hole. Do you get relief from both of those? The answer is yes, but notice the relief is different. If you are standing on a anthill, what is that anthill? It's a loose impediment. And we learned in Rule 16 that when you take relief from a loose impediment, you move the object. What is the gopher hole? It's an animal hole. And we're going to see under Rule 16 that the way you get relief from the animal hole is that you move the ball. And we're going to go through that process. All right, ground under repair on page 334. The thing to keep in mind about ground under repair is there are 4 sections to this rule. The first section depends on the committee doing something. The last 3 of the 4 we're going to go through are automatic. The committee doesn't have to do anything. So ground under repair. Any part of the course, the committee defines to be ground under repair, whether by marking it or otherwise. Any defined ground under repair includes both all ground inside the edge of the defined area. And again, that's something that the committee must do. They can do it by putting a line, but they also can do it by a description of some sort. The flower bed, the third hole. And any grass, bush, trees, or other growing or attached natural object rooted in the defined area, including any part of those objects that extend up above the ground outside the edge of the defined area, but not when the object is attached to or below the ground. So what does that mean? That means if you have an area marked as ground under repair, and there is a tree in the ground under repair, and the tree that's in the ground under repair is hanging over onto the general area of the course, and you are taking your swing and you have interference for that branch, your ball is considered having interference from the ground under repair. So you do get free relief. Notice when we get to penalty area, the penalty area goes straight up and down. So it's contrary if you have a penalty area, where if something is hanging outside of the penalty area and you take a swing at it, that's not interference by the penalty area. All right. Ground under repair, the second part of this. Ground under repair also includes the following things, even if the committee does not define them. Any hole made by the committee or the maintenance staff in setting up the course, such as a hole where a stake has been removed, or a hole on a double green being used for the play of another hole, or maintaining the course, such as a hole made in removing turf or tree stumps or laying pipes. So notice that if you have a double green situation like Westmore is I believe it's the 10th and the 14th. I think I'm right on that. Or Meadow Valley, Black Wolf Run, the 18th holes of those two courses are one large green. If you happen to hit it into the other hole, that is ground under repair. All right, third part of ground under repair. Grass cuttings, leaves, and other material for later removal, but any natural materials that are piled for removal are also loose impediments. Any materials left on the course that are not intended to be removed are ground under repair, unless the committee chooses something else. So your standard maintenance, where the greenskeeper is mowing the greens, he gets done with his shavings, he takes the stuff and he just dumps it. Usually they try and dump it not directly in a pile, but kind of scatter it. Those are not items that are being piled for later removal. You may get some courses, perhaps the private upscale courses that don't want the materials left there. They might put it into a nice pile, and if their intent is to remove it, then it's going to be considered ground under repair. All right, fourth, any animal habitat, such as a bird's nest, that is so near a player's ball that the player stroker stance might damage it. So this is a situation not where you will be damaged, but the bird nest or habitat will be damaged. What if you will be damaged? Well, that's going to be the dangerous animal conditions, and we'll talk about that when we get to 16.2. The edge of the ground under repair should be defined by stakes, lines, or physical features. Stakes. When defined by stakes, the edge of the ground under repair is defined by the line between the outside point of the stakes at ground level and the stakes are inside ground under repair. When you have lines defined by painted lines, the edge of the ground under repair is the outside edge of the line, and the line itself is in the ground under repair. Here's how you remember it. Stakes and lines are always in what they define. Repeat that. Stakes and lines are always in what they define. So if you have a penalty area and you have a red line on the ground, that red line is in the penalty area. If you have ground under repair and you have a white line on the ground, that white line is in the ground under repair. If you have a white out of bounds line, that white line is in the out of bounds. That's the way to remember it. Now, if you use both stakes and lines, the lines actually define the ground under repair, and the stakes are there just to show you that it's there. So if you're looking from a distance, you can see it. Those stakes may or may not be put in the penalty area, depending on what the committee or the maintenance staff does, because those are not defining anything. Those are just showing you where the white line defined area is. However, if you have stakes only and there is no white line, then the stakes themselves define the area. The stakes themselves are in the ground under repair. Physical features, when defined by physical features such as a flower bed, the committee should say how the edge of the ground under repair is defined. Again, that's the committee's job. Generally, you may have a flower bed and there may be a very sharp line, sharp edge. Maybe it's concrete, maybe it's mulch, and you can write it up that way, or you could just put a white line down. When the edge of the ground under repair is defined by lines or physical features, stakes may be used to show where the ground under repair is. So that's just what we went through. If you have a white line, the stake doesn't have any meaning other than to show you that that's the where it is.
So Dan, by physical features, you would mean if you repair an area of turf and you have pieces of sod laying, put one stake in the middle of it, and that's kind of defined by?
No, defined the stakes.
Kind of physical features.
Well, a physical feature would be as I described. You have a flower bed, let's say it's 10 feet in circular, and you say it is the edge of the mulch that surrounds the flower bed. Everything in that is ground under repair. So the physical feature is the mulch that describes where the ground under repair is. When stakes are used to define or show the edge of ground under repair, they are obstructions. And almost always they're movable obstructions. It's very unusual that you'll have a stake that is a permanent type stake. All right, immovable obstructions, 337. We've gone through the definition of obstruction, I believe, when we went over 15. It's any obstruction that, and remember, an obstruction is an artificial object other than a boundary stake or a boundary object or an integral object. Any obstruction that cannot be moved without unreasonable effort or without damaging the obstruction or the course, and otherwise does not meet the definition of a movable obstruction. The committee may define any obstruction to be an immovable obstruction, even if it meets the definition of movable obstruction. Generally speaking, that's not a good thing for the committee to do, because if there is a obstruction, such as a pole, the first thing the player is going to do is try and remove it, and you avoid the problem by not making it so difficult that they can't remove it. All right, temporary water, 363. We're still talking about the 4 types of abnormal course condition. Any temporary accumulation of water on the surface of the ground, you want to underscore surface of the ground, such as puddles from rain or irrigation or an overflow from a body of water that is not in a penalty area and can be seen before and after the player takes a stance without pressing down excessively with their feet. So can you have a temporary water in a penalty area? The answer is no. By definition, you can't. Notice that if you have tournaments that use tall grass areas as penalty areas, you're not anticipating that there's going to be water in there, but if you have a huge rain, you could have water in that penalty area. That's not temporary water because it doesn't meet the definition. It's not enough for the ground to be merely wet, mushy, or soft, for the water to be momentarily visible, and an accumulation of water must remain present either before or after the stance is taken. The classic expression is it's the stance, not the dance. Whenever I'm asking a player, or you get a request to get relief from temporary water, what does the player do? They take their stance and you say, well, I don't see any water. And what do? They jump up and down and they say, see, here's the water. And then when you say to them, it's the stance, not the dance, they kind of look at you and then the light bulb goes on and they say, oh, I see. I just have to take my normal stance. You smile, they smile, and then everybody understands it. So it's kind of corny, but it's a very useful expression to remember. It's the stance, not the dance. Special cases, dew and frost are not temporary water. Again, putting green is a good example. Snow and natural ice other than frost are either loose impediments or when on the ground, temporary water. So if you're up by a pine tree and there is snow on the tree branch of the pine tree, that is not temporary water. Why? Because it's not on the ground. Manufactured ice, you see this should be obvious. It's an obstruction. It's man-made. Somebody dumped out their can of Coke, or there wouldn't be a can, but a cup of Coke, and the ice cubes are there. That's a obstruction. All right, nearest point of complete relief, 347. You know any definition and you want to be a rules official, you sure got to know nearest point of complete relief. It's on page 347. The nearest point of complete relief. The first thing to know about it is a reference point. What is a reference point? That means it's something that's going to tell you where you want to or how you want to take relief. It's not the spot of the ball. It's just a reference point. And it's a reference point for taking relief from an abnormal course condition, which we're going to go over in a minute, dangerous animal condition, 16.2, wrong green, 13.1F, or a no play zone, or in taking relief under certain local rules. It is the estimated point where the ball would lie that is nearest to the ball's original spot, but not near the hole, in the required area of the course, and where there is no interference under a rule being used from the condition from which relief is being taken for the stroke the player would have made from the original spot if the condition were not there. So again, you're looking for the nearest spot to where the ball lies, such that when you get all done, that reference point means that the player is not going to have interference. When we get to rule 16.1, we're going to see that doesn't mean where you put the ball. That just means you found the nearest point of complete relief, which is the reference point that you're then going to use in rule 16. Estimating this relief point requires the player to identify the choice of club, stance, swing, or line of play they would have used for that stroke. In other words, you are required to identify, at least in your mind, the stroke. But the next paragraph says the player does not need to simulate that stroke by taking an actual stance and swing, but it's recommended to do so. So what does that mean? That means if your ball is up by the putting green and you're going to chip the ball, and you take out your driver and you say, well, this is going to be my nearest point of complete relief, that would not be what you're required to do, because most likely your shot is going to be a pitching wedge, and you're going to take your stance for that pitching wedge, and then that's how you determine the nearest point of complete relief. When you actually take complete relief, when you actually take relief and you drop, we're going to see in a minute that you can use, that you will use the longest club in your bag, which is likely your driver. But for simulating the nearest point of complete relief, you have to choose the club that fits the situation. All right, the nearest point of complete relief relates solely to the particular condition. I would underscore the words solely to the particular condition from which relief is being taken, and may be in a location where there is interference by something else. Bullet point 1, if the player takes relief and then has interference by another condition from which relief is allowed, the player may take relief again by determining a new nearest point of complete relief from the new condition. The point here is that you take relief one rule at a time, one condition at a time. As an example, if up by the putting green, there are 2 sprinkler heads, both of which are abnormal course conditions, and the committee has not circled them and determined those to be one abnormal course condition, then those are 2 separate conditions. So if you take relief from one of the sprinkler heads, because perhaps you're standing on it, and when you get done, you have complete relief because there is no interference for that first sprinkler head, you have completed taking relief. You may have a new situation, that is to say the second sprinkler head may interfere, and then you get the choice again as to whether you do or don't want to take relief. Similarly, if your ball is in the fairway and the course is marked with some various ground under repairs because of damage, you may take relief from one ground under repair, drop the ball, you've taken complete relief outside, but you're standing in a new ground under repair. You have taken complete relief and you have a new situation. And when you have a new situation, that means you apply the rules all over again. Last bullet point. Relief must be taken separately for each condition, except that the player may take relief from both conditions at the same time based on determining the nearest point of complete relief from both. When, having already taken relief separately from each, it becomes reasonable to conclude that you're going to just continue ping-ponging back and forth. So as an example, you hit your ball, it's on a cart path. You know you're entitled to relief, and as you go to take your stance, you're standing in temporary water. What this is saying is you cannot, in one step, take relief and find the nearest point of relief that gives you relief from both the temporary water and the cart path. Well, which one do you have to choose? You're the player, you decide. If you want to take relief from the cart path first, you can. Maybe when you finish, the ball has temporary water interference, maybe it doesn't. If it does, you then get to decide whether you want to take relief from the second condition. It's only when you drop from the cart path into the temporary water, and then to take relief from the temporary water, you have to drop back on the cart path. And it's reasonable to conclude that this will continue ad infinitum. Then you get to choose a spot that has a relief from both at the same time. There are two very good clarifications. We won't go over them, but for the first bullet point, I would see 16.1/2, which talks about new conditions. And then for the second bullet point, I would look at 16.1/3, which talks about the taking relief from both at the same time, only if you have tried it once. And then you've gone back and forth. And the final point on that is you cannot say to yourself, well, I know that if I drop from the cart path, it's going to go into temporary water. And I know if I drop it in the temporary water, it's going to go onto the cart path. It's not enough for you to know that. You must actually go through that process and determine that that in fact is what happened before you are allowed to go to the second step, which is to take complete relief from both conditions at the same time. The last thing on nearest point of complete relief, nearest point of complete relief /1 at the bottom of the page. It says in the diagram, the nearest point of complete relief, and then let's turn the page and look at the diagram. The ball is on the cart path at point B1. The player ideally would like to drop at P2. Why? Because he has a clear shot. However, the rules require you to find the nearest spot. And another one of the somewhat corny phrases, but again, it's a very good mnemonic device, is it's the nearest point of complete relief. It's not the nicest point of complete relief. So in looking at that diagram, if you decide to take relief, the player is going to have to drop their ball in the relief area determined by the P1 reference. They do not have the option to go to the P2 reference point and have a relief area. All right, with those definitions under our belt, let's look at 16.1. Abnormal course conditions, including immovable obstruction. This rule covers free relief that is allowed from interference by animal holes, ground under repairs, immovable obstructions, or temporary water. These are collectively called abnormal course conditions. This rule does not give relief from movable obstructions. Why? Because you have to look at Rule 15. It doesn't give you free relief from boundary objects or integral objects. Why? Because there are no free relief from those items. 16.1a, when relief is allowed. Meaning of interference. Interference exists when any of these 3 apply. The player's ball touches or is in or on or abnormal course condition. Classic example, your ball's on a cart path. Second bullet point. An abnormal course condition physically interferes with the player's area of intended stance or area of intended swing. And then the third is only when the ball is on the putting green, an abnormal course condition on or off the putting green intervenes on the line of play. An example of that would be the 18th hole at Meadow Valley and the River Course. You have a very large green. You could have a sprinkler head. In fact, I know there is one on that green. And if you are putting and you have intervention with that sprinkler head, you're going to get free relief. Notice also that you have intervention if your ball is on the putting green and the abnormal course condition is off the putting green. An example of that would be you are putting on a course that has a very steep putting green. And in order for you to putt towards the hole, your line of play is to putt the ball just off the edge of the putting green and then have it roll back down to the hole. If there is a sprinkler head that is directly on your line of play, that is off the putting green, what this is saying is that is considered interference. If the abnormal course condition is close enough to distract the player but does not meet any of these requirements, there is no interference under this rule. In other words, there's no interference for mental interference. There has to be physical interference or intervention on the putting green. Parent 2, relief allowed anywhere on course except when ball is in the penalty area. A relief from interference by an abnormal course condition is allowed under 16.1 only when both the abnormal course condition is on the course, not out of bounds, and the ball is anywhere on the course except in a penalty area. If the ball's in the penalty area, your relief is the penalty area rule. You're not going to get relief from an abnormal course condition in a penalty area. An example of that is once in a while, you'll see a cart path that is run through a penalty area. Well, you don't get relief from it. Parent 3, no relief when clearly unreasonable. We're going to see this in each of these relief rules under Rule 16. And the way to remember this is you're not going to get a benefit to take relief for the fortuitous nature that your ball happens to be in an abnormal course condition. Another way that this is often expressed is you don't have a get out of jail free card in this situation. If it's clearly unreasonable to make the shot, you don't get relief. All right, let's go through it. When playing the ball as it lies, it's clearly unreasonable because of something from which the player is not allowed to take free relief, such as when the player is unable to make a stroke because of where the ball lies in a bush, or when interference exists only because a player chooses a club type of stance or swing or direction of play that is clearly unreasonable. The point here is it must be clearly unreasonable. If it is reasonable under the circumstances, you are allowed to take a stance that may at first glance appear to be unreasonable. What's an example of that? You are a right-handed player, the ball comes up right behind, or excuse me, just to the right of the side of the tree. In order for you to make that stance as a right-handed player, it is impossible to get to the ball. The only way you could play it is left-handed. So is it reasonable to make a left-handed stroke in that circumstances? The answer is yes. What if you are then standing on a cart path to make that left-handed stroke? That is not clearly unreasonable because you are not using a stance and swing that is clearly unreasonable under the circumstances. In fact, it's very reasonable because that's the only way you can make the stance. You then are entitled to free relief. Once you drop the ball and you have complete relief, what's the rule? You got a new situation. If you are now free to hit in any direction, you can hit in free direction, and you're not required to maintain the left-handed swing you are allowed to play any way you want towards the hole. There's a clarification on that, 16.1A3. It is on page 228. And it goes through just the example that I gave. It's worth reading, but again, it's the example that I gave where the player, it's unreasonable to make a right-handed swing because of the tree, and then the player turns their club over, standing on a cart path. They then take free relief, and then once having taken free relief, they're allowed to play in any direction they want. All right, so let's talk about how you take relief. 16.1B. If a player's ball is in the general area and there is interference by an abnormal course condition, the player may take free relief by dropping the original ball or another ball in this relief area. 16.1B is the classic example of taking relief in the general area from a cart pad. I refer to this as the two-step process. Let's go through why it's a two-step process. First, you have to determine the nearest point of complete relief in the general area. The size is going to be 1 club length. And as a refresher, anytime you have a relief area, it's always going to be 1 club length with the exception of lateral penalty relief. Size of the relief area, 1 club length. Limitations on the location of the relief area: must be in the general area, must not be nearer the hole than the reference point, and there must be complete relief from all interference by the abnormal course condition. Typically what happens is if the player's ball is on the cart path, they'll call you over, they'll look at you, and they'll say, I get 1 club length, don't I? And what they're thinking is, they get their driver, they measure it from the spot that their ball is on the cart path, and then they drop it. And that's why I consider this a two-step process. And I usually say to the player, just remember it's a two-step process. You have to first find the nearest point of complete relief, which, depending on whether you're right-handed or left-handed, could be 3 or 4 feet off of that cart path. And then once you have that reference point, the player would then get their 1 club length. So the diagram on 217, the ball is in ground under repair. You have a nice white line. The nearest point of complete relief is the large black dot, referred to as the reference point. Notice that it's kind of hard to tell from this drawing, but if the player's right-handed, their left foot, when they take their stance, has to be outside that white line. Why? Because if it's not, they haven't taken they haven't found the nearest point of complete relief. Once you find that reference point, you then get 1 club length no near the hole. 16.1C, relief for ball and bunker. If the player's ball is in a bunker and there's interference by an abnormal course condition on the course, the player may take either free relief under 1 or penalty relief under 2. So let's go through 1. The player may take free relief, except that the nearest point of complete relief and the relief area must be in the bunker. So when you look at the drawing on the next page on 218, the player's ball is in the temporary water. The player, the nearest point of complete relief and the reference point need to be in the bunker. What happens if there is no nearest point of complete relief in the bunker? Then the player is allowed to take relief based on the point of maximum available relief in the bunker as the reference point. So going back to that drawing on 218, if this blue water area was towards the back of the bunker, it may be a situation where no matter where you drop the ball, you could not find a spot that gives you complete relief. what the point of maximum available relief is saying is you can use that instead. So let's look at that definition. It's on 355. And I must say that this rarely, if ever, comes up, because if you have that much water in a bunker where there is no place to take relief, generally there's a suspension of play, or if there's a cancellation of the round, or some other determination is made by the committee. You inspect the various bunkers and you say, well, we got a problem on hole 12. Well, let's do something else. Let's figure out a dropping, I don't know, something. Suspend play until the water subsides. Point of maximum available relief. The reference point for taking free relief from an abnormal course condition in a bunker or on a putting green. So this only applies in those two situations. It's the estimated point where the ball would lie that is nearest to the ball's original spot, but not near the hole. It's in the required area, so it's got to be in the bunker. That's what we're concerned with. Where the abnormal course condition least interferes with the stroke the player would have made from their original spot if the condition was not there. So understand that what the rules are allowing you to do is to take relief, understanding that you're not taking complete relief. You're simply taking the point of maximum available. You estimate this reference point requires the player to identify the choice of club, stance, swing. The player does not need to simulate that. We've gone through that with ground under repair. The point of maximum available relief is found by comparing the relative amount of interference with the line of the ball and the player's area of intended stance and swing, and on the putting green only the line of play. The point of maximum available relief may be where the ball will be in shallower water than where the player will stand, affecting the stance more than the swing, or where the ball is deeper in water and where the player will stand, affecting the lie and swing more than the stance. Any player who has a ball in the bunker will always want to stand in the water and have the ball outside the water rather than have the ball in the water and have your feet nice and dry. But that's not your choice. You have to compare them. And if you want to use the maximum point of maximum available relief, you have to go through this process. On the putting green, the point of maximum available relief may be based on the line of play where the ball will need to go through the shallowest or shortest stretch of temporary water. Again, extremely unlikely that you're going to run into this, because if there's that much water on the putting green, the committee most likely will have suspended play or have not even started play. But this tells you how to do it if we need to do it. All right, let's go back to Rule 16.1. And this is parent 2. Penalty relief, playing from outside bunker back on the line relief. For one penalty stroke, the player may drop the original ball or another ball outside the bunker, keeping the spot of the original ball between the hole and the spot where the ball is dropped, with no limit on how far back the ball may be dropped. The spot on the line where the ball first touches the ground when dropped creates a relief area that's 1 club length in any direction. Again, as a reminder, this is a change for 2023. The back on the line procedure, you'll see in the drawing on page 218 that the player is required to drop on the line. There is no relief area until they drop it on the line. When they drop it on the line, that dropping itself is what creates the 1 club length relief area. And notice the ball, once it drops, can actually roll forward up to 1 club length and still be in the relief area. Unusual that this occurs, but so be it. One last thing before we move off of balls taking relief from a bunker. Once the player has taken maximum available relief in the bunker, the question comes up, can the player then go on to take bottle relief, back on the line relief, for one penalty outside? And the answer is yes. And the reason is because once you have taken maximum available relief in the bunker, you still have interference from the temporary water. It's a new situation. You still have that relief. You're allowed to then take the back on the line procedure. There is a clarification, 16.1C/1, that makes this point.
So Dan, are those two penalties, two relief penalties?
No, because the first one is free.
Or first one's free, the second one is 2 strokes.
No, the second one is 1 stroke because you are taking relief outside under 16.1C2, which is a 1-stroke penalty. The first relief,
Doing it unplayable.
correct. The first one you were taking was the ball had interference from temporary water. That's a free relief. When you then take back on the line outside the penalty area, you're proceeding with a 1-stroke penalty. All right, 16.1D as in dog. This is the one-step process. And the reason I refer to it as a one-step process is because you find your nearest point of complete relief, and then you simply place the ball at that spot because you're on the putting green. So the reference point and the spot where you place the ball are the same. If a player's ball is on the putting green and there is interference by an abnormal course condition on the course, the player may take free relief by placing the original ball or another ball on the spot of the nearest point of complete relief, using the procedure for replacing it. The nearest point of complete relief must be either on the putting green or in the general area. So in the drawing at the bottom of the page, on 219, this is a left-handed player. The player's ball is the white dot that's in the blue water. Since the person is left-handed, they have to get their feet such that the ball would then be outside the temporary water. That is the nearest point of complete relief. And since it's a one-step process, you're just going to place the ball there. Notice that if the ball was very far on the left-hand side of this blue water, and the person was standing in the water, they would get free relief. And it's possible that their nearest point of complete relief for the feet to be out of the water would be such that the ball would be just off the putting green. Notice that even though the ball is off the putting green, it's a place situation, not a drop. Why? Because the original ball is on the putting green. If the original ball is on the putting green, your relief procedure is to place. All right, 16.1E. This is the 3-step relief procedure. Relief for ball not found, but in or on abnormal course condition. By the way, when you see the term ball not found, isn't that the same thing as a lost ball? And the answer is no. Remember, the definition of lost means that it's a clock stop, it's a stopwatch timing mechanism. You look for it, three minutes later, you don't find it. That ball is lost. If you hit your ball into ground under repair, you may get there and within 30 seconds say, oh, I don't think I can find it. That ball is not lost because the 3 minutes is not up, but you haven't found it. And that's what we're going to go through under Rule 16.1E. If a player's ball has not been found and it's known or virtually certain that the ball came to rest in or on an abnormal course condition on the course, the player may use this relief option instead of taking stroke and distance. So in this situation, the player gets a choice. An example would be you hit your drive, you push it off to the right, and you get up there and there's a big area of temporary water, ground under repair. It's known or virtually certain that it's in it. You can't find it. You don't look very long, but you can't find it. You can always go back to the tee and play under stroke and distance, or you can take 16.1E relief. And here's the three-step process. The player may take free relief by using B, C, or D, using the estimated point where the ball last crossed the edge of the abnormal course condition on the course as the spot of the ball for purposes of finding the nearest point of complete relief. In other words, the first thing you have to do is not find the nearest point of complete relief, but to determine where your ball is so that you can then take the second step, which is the nearest point of complete relief, so that you can then take the third step, which is take the one club length. Once the player puts another ball in play to take relief in this way, the original ball is no longer in play and must not be played. And this is true if it is then found on the course before the end of the 3 minutes. But if it's not known or virtually certain that the ball came to rest in an abnormal course condition and the ball is lost, the player must take stroke and distance relief. We had an interesting situation. I think it was the senior amateur this summer. It was at Blackhawk, and in the middle of the tournament, we had a large branch. It was probably 30 feet around that fell just in the rough by the 7th hole at Blackhawk. I mean, it was huge. You couldn't possibly move this branch. So it's now ground under repair. But here's the question. If you hit your ball into that, are you going to get free relief? Yes, because it's ground under repair. If you see where your ball is, how do you take relief? You take relief under 16.1b, the two-step process. What if you don't know where your ball is? You know it's in this big tree branch. Are you required to go in and look? No. It must be known or virtually certain that the ball is in there. If it is, then you use the three-step process. So you would say, where did the ball last enter that ground under repair? That's step one. Then from there, you would find your nearest point of complete relief. And then from there, you would get one club length. So there's a little strategy involved. If you hit your ball into that area and you don't find it, you'll know that it's where it entered. And you may decide that you want to find it, because once you find it, then your nearest point of complete relief is going to be based on the location of where you found it, not where it entered. All right, 16.1F. Relief must be taken from interference by no play zone in abnormal course condition. Let's look at the definition of no play zone on 350. Nice thing about the term no play zone is it kind of tells you that you can't play from that spot. Very nice title for this term. A part of the course where the committee has prohibited play, a no play zone must be defined as part of either an abnormal course condition or a penalty area. The committee may use no play zones for any reason. Notice that the word is any reason. And then here are the lists. Often it's used to protect an environmentally sensitive area. More recently, it's been used for culturally or historically sensitive areas such as Indian mounds and burial grounds and the like. The committee should define the edge of the no play zone with a line or a stake, and the line or stake or the tops of these stakes should identify the no play zone as different than the regular abnormal course condition. Courses are starting to do that. Instead of using a white line, they may use green stakes. They may use brown stakes. They may use white stakes with green tops. And then typically in the notice to players or in the local rules, it says the white stakes with the green top areas on hold, blah, 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 are no play zones. Also, let's look at the clarification at the top of 351, no play zone /1, status of growing things overhanging a no play zone. And this goes over what we just did with the ground under repair. The status of growing things that overhang a no play zone depend on the type of no play zone that it is. For example, if the no play zone has been designed by a penalty area, any part of the growing object that extends beyond the edge of the no play zone is not part of the no play zone. However, if the no play zone has been defined as ground under repair, then the part that extends above the ground, outside the ground under repair, is going to be part of the no play zone. So what difference does it make? Well, it makes a big difference because you will have played from a wrong place if it's ground under repair in an abnormal course condition and your ball is outside, and as you swing, the ball hits something that was growing in and hanging outside the ground under repair / no play zone. You have interference and you would be required to take relief. All right, so let's go back to 16.1F. Relief when no play zone, when ball is in no play zone anywhere on the course except the penalty area. If the player's ball is in a no play zone in the general area, the bunker or the putting green, you simply use the three rules that we just went over: 16.1B, general area, 16.1C, bunker, 16.1D, putting green. Number two, relief when when no play zone interferes with stance or swing for ball anywhere on the course except penalty area. If the player's ball is outside a no play zone and is in the general area, a bunker, or a putting green, and a no play zone, whether in the abnormal course condition, interferes with the player must either take relief if allowed under 16B, C, or D, or take unplayable ball relief. In other words, the example that I gave is if you have interference from an abnormal course condition / in a no play zone, or a no play zone in an abnormal course condition, you're required to take relief. All right, let's look at dangerous animal condition. 16.2. Dangerous animal condition exists when a dangerous animal, such as a venomous snake, stinging bees, alligators, fire ants, or bears, near a ball could cause serious physical injury to the player if they had to play the ball as it lies. A player may take relief under 16.2B from interference, no matter where the ball is on the course. This rule does not apply to other situations on the course that could cause physical harm, such as a cactus. We had a situation where a player went into the woods at I think it was the state amateur a few years ago at Minocqua. He says, there's poison ivy in there. Do I get free relief? And the answer is no, at least not under this rule, because this deals with dangerous animal conditions, not dangerous course conditions. So it's gotta be an animal. What's the relief procedure? When there is interference by a dangerous animal condition, and notice there's a little subjective judgment in here. If you have an alligator, just how close do you have to get to the alligator before it's considered might endanger you? The player may take relief under B, C, or D, depending on whether the ball is in the general area, bunker, or putting green. When the ball is in a penalty area, the player may take free relief or penalty relief. If you take free relief, the player may take free relief, except that the nearest point of complete relief and the relief area must be in the penalty area. So an example of that is you're in the penalty area, there's an alligator directly in front of you. You can move back to a safe spot, but you got to stay in the penalty area. Penalty area relief, you can play the ball from outside the penalty area. Obviously, your ball is in the penalty area. Player may take penalty relief if there is interference by the dangerous animal condition where the ball would be played after taking this penalty relief. Outside the penalty area, the player may take further relief under 1 without additional penalty. So an example of that is that your ball is in a penalty area. There's an alligator pretty close to the penalty area line. You say, oh, I'm just going to take by 2 club lengths. You measure your 2 club lengths and you still see that alligator there. What this is saying is that you can drop it, then take free relief from the alligator, and you're going to get just the 1 penalty stroke rather than 2. Everybody understand that? You're going to get 1 for taking penalty area relief, but now you're in the general area and you're going to get free relief. Question I'm usually asked is, do you actually have to drop it in the relief area? If I were the rules official on the spot and I determined or thought that that was such a dangerous situation, I would say, let's skip the step of dropping it there. Let's go back however far you feel comfortable and play it from there. We did have a situation at the state amateur at Westmore. It was the 13th hole to par 4. The player hit his ball into the bunker on the right-hand side. That's where his ball came to rest on the drive. The player went in to play the ball, and there were bees / wasp, some sort of thing. I don't know exactly what, probably wasp. The player said he was deathly afraid of them, and did he get free relief? Well, the answer is yes, you get free relief, but your relief has to be in the bunker. The player says, well, there's not a spot in the bunker that's far enough away that I feel comfortable with. And the response, unfortunately for the player, is that's your option. If you don't like it, you can declare the ball unplayable, and you can go back stroke of distance, you can go back on the line, and so forth. I think the player finally decided he'd take his lumps, got in there as quick as he could, hit it, and on he went. All right, so look at then the bottom of 16.2, parent 3, no relief when clearly unreasonable. This is the same one we've just had. If you hit your ball into an area where the ball is clearly unplayable, maybe it's in a bush, maybe it's wedged in a tree trunk, you can't make a stroke, and you say, oh, there are some stinging bees flying around, I get free relief. What this is saying is there's no relief when it's clearly unreasonable to make the stroke that you would have had to make if the dangerous animal condition had not been there. All right, let's move on to 16.3, embedded ball. There is a definition of embedded ball, which seems odd because the rule itself has an even better definition of embedded ball. And embedded ball only has meaning within the context of 16.3. There is no such concept as an embedded ball other than in the context of 16.3. So let's go through that rule and then we'll cover the internal definition. Ball must be embedded in the general area. Relief is allowed under 16.3b only when the player's ball is embedded in the general area. There is no relief if the ball is embedded anywhere except in the general area. But if the ball is embedded on the putting green, the player may mark the spot of the ball, lift, clean, repair the damage caused by the ball's impact, and replace the ball in its original spot. This seems odd to think of that as an embedded ball. I guess it technically is, but on the putting green, the player is simply going to mark it, repair the spot, set it on top, and on you go. All right, here's the exception. When relief not allowed for a ball embedded in the general area, there is no relief under 16.3b when the ball is embedded in sand in part of the general area that is not cut to fairway height or less. So what is the only part of the course that is cut to fairway height or less? Pretty easy, the fairway, right? So what this is saying is that when we played Sand Valley at the State Am, when the player's ball hit the sand and, quote, embedded, the player did not get relief for the embedded ball because they were in sand and they were not in an area that was cut to fairway height or less. So what's an example of getting relief for a ball embedded in sand in an area cut to fairway height or less? It's almost impossible for this to happen. But if you hit your tee shot and it lands in a sand-filled divot and embeds in that sand-filled divot, you are now in sand in an area that is cut to fairway height or less. but notice that it has to embed, and we're going to see the definition in just a minute. 99% of the time, if your ball is in a sand-filled divot in the fairway, it's because your ball hit the fairway, rolled into the sand-filled divot, in which case you're not going to get relief for an embedded ball. Why? Because the ball is not embedded. What's the definition of embedded? This is the top of 223, determining whether ball is embedded. A player's ball is embedded only if it's in its own pitch mark made a result of the player's previous stroke. Part of the ball is below the level of the ground. If the player cannot tell whether the ball is in its own pitch mark or a pitch mark made by another ball, the player may treat the ball as embedded if it's reasonable to conclude from the available information that the ball is in its own pitch mark. If a ball is not embedded, if it's below the level of the ground as a result of anything other than the player's previous stroke. So these three always come up on the national exam. The ball is pushed into the ground by someone stepping on it. Is the ball embedded if you're walking down the fairway and you step on it? No, it's in the ground. Common sense may say the ball is embedded, but for purposes of the rules of golf, that ball is not embedded. Why? Because it isn't in its own pitch mark as a result of the player's previous stroke. The ball, you're taking free relief under 16.1, you drop your ball in a squishy area and the ball goes into the ground. We think of that as being embedded, but it's not within the definition of 16.3. Embedded must be its own pitch mark. All right, relief for embedded ball. When a player's ball is embedded in the general area and relief is allowed under 16.3a, the player may take free relief by dropping the original ball or another ball in this relief area. It is the spot in the general area right behind where the ball is embedded. You're going to get one club length and it must be in the general area. So if you look at the drawing on the bottom of page 224, you have the white spot where the ball is. The reference point is directly behind it, and the player has an embedded ball. We had an interesting situation last summer at the State Open. It was the 16th hole at Ozaki, which is a par 3. One of the top players in the state hit their ball. It's a par 3. There is a large bunker right in front of the green. The pin was in the very front of the green. It's sort of an elevated green. The player hit his ball and it landed about 6 inches over the bunker and then was embedded deeply in the ground, not more than 15 feet from the hole probably, but nevertheless in a very difficult spot. So the first question was, did the player get embedded ball relief? And the answer is yes, even though it was probably in a little bit of rough. So does he get embedded ball relief? Yes. What is the relief procedure? You find the spot directly behind where the ball was embedded. And then he gets one club length no near the hole. He doesn't drop the ball where the within 6 inches, that was the old rule. The player had virtually no shot if he had to drop the ball directly behind the embedded ball. He didn't have a stance, but because he got one club length and could move no nearer the hole, he was then able to drop the ball and get free relief. He dropped the ball. It's a very severe drop, pitch, a drop, and it rolled into the bunker. So you get to drop again? Yes, that's 14.3. We went over that's the drop place rule. He dropped it a second time, it rolled in the bunker. Then what does he get to do? He gets to place it on the spot where it first hit the course the second time. And that spot was very precarious. And he asked me, what happens if that ball now rolls into the bunker? And the answer, at least in 2022, was you play it as it lies from the bunker. So the player then quickly hit the shot, got his par and moved on and made it to a playoff because he got free relief. When after I gave the relief, a player came up, or not a player, but a spectator came up to me and said, I don't think that's fair, because what this player got is he got a location for where he had no shot, no stance, and after he got relief, he then had an easy shot to the green. And the only response to that is, yes, you're probably right, but that's what the rules say. You get one club length no nearer the hole, which in this situation allowed the player to actually have a stance and then to be able to play his ball. All right, two questions. What if the spot directly behind the ball had not been 6 inches, but had been 1 inch before it went into the bunker, or had been 1 inch from a penalty area, or 1 inch from out of bounds? The old rule in 2022 was the player effectively didn't get relief. Now for 2023, we have a new clarification. It's 16.3b1. Let's take a look at that. 16.3b1. When a player is allowed to take relief from a ball embedded in the general area, there are situations where the spot immediately behind where the ball is embedded is not in the general area. When this occurs, the relief procedure requires the player to find the nearest spot in the general area that is not near the hole to the spot immediately behind where the ball is embedded. And this spot becomes the reference point for taking relief. So in the situation, it didn't occur with this one at Ozaki, but you can envision situations where the curvature of the bunker or the penalty area is such that the nearest spot that is in the general area could be 3 feet away, it could be 6 feet away, it could be 10 feet away. Well, this interpretation is saying that's what you do. You find the nearest spot in the general area, and then you're going to get one club length from there. Second thing about this situation in 2022 is the player asked me what happens if the ball, the ball is placed, what happens if the gravity pulls it into the bunker? And the answer in 2022 is you play it as it lies. What's the answer in 2023? You place the ball. John went over this. This is the new exception to 9.3. It's exception 2. I think of this as the Ricky Fowler exception. If you are placing, dropping, or replacing a ball, and it is then at rest, and then the ball moves to another area of the course. It's not just that it moves a few inches or a few feet. It has to move to another area of the course. So in this example on the 16th hole, if it moved into the bunker, you would then replace the ball on the spot. All right. Where are we? 16.4.
Again, just quickly, if Ricky Fowler's ball had rolled down the hill but not gone into the water, play it as it lies.
Yeah, the question is, if your ball rolls after you've put it, replaced it, dropped it, replaces, the key is did it roll to another area of the course? So it can roll 50 feet away, and if it rolls from the general area to the general area, you have to play it as it lies. On the other hand, if it moves 1 foot from the general area to a penalty area, then you're going to replace it where the original spot was. 16.4. This is the final section of 16. It really is not a relief procedure, but rather, as the title says, you are allowed to lift your ball to see if it lies in a condition where you're going to get relief. If a player reasonably believes that their ball is in a condition where free relief is allowed under, let's take the embedded ball rule, but cannot decide without lifting, the player may lift the ball to see if it's allowed, but the spot of the ball must first be marked and the lifted ball must not be cleaned except on the putting green. So what this is saying is that the player hits his ball, it's in the rough, he doesn't know whether it's embedded. How do you proceed? The player marks their ball. typically they call you over and they say, do I get relief from this? And then you say, what's this? And the player says, I think my ball's embedded. There's two ways to approach this. One is you say to the player, yes, you can mark it. You can determine whether it's embedded, or you can say, mark the ball, and I, the rules official, will determine whether it's embedded. I like the first procedure. I like to have the player mark it, pick it up, have the player determine whether he thinks it's embedded. Then you say to the player, well, is it embedded? And the player says, well, I don't think so. Well, that's the end of it. The problem comes up if the player says, well, I can't tell, or blah, blah, blah. What's your opinion? Then you have to determine by putting your finger down and seeing whether the ball has broken the plane. So that's the procedure that I like to use. Have the player make the initial determination, and then if they want a second opinion or if they're unsure, then you help them out. If player lifts a ball without having this reasonable belief, they're going to get a 1 penalty stroke. And the rest of this makes sense. If you lift it and you determine that you are entitled to free relief and you didn't mark it, well, you're not going to get a penalty because you have no requirement to mark a ball that you are going to lift to play from a different place. However, if you don't mark it and it's determined that it's not in a embedded ball position, then you weren't entitled to lift it without marking it, and therefore you're going to get a 1 penalty stroke. Penalty for playing a ball from the wrong place in breach of this rule, general penalty. All right, that's 16. Jeff, do you have any questions?
We do have two that came online during Rule 16, and the first one asks, when a right-handed player who needs to make a left-handed stroke for a ball next to a tree is standing on a cart path, does the nearest point of relief require you to maintain a left-handed stroke?
I think the question could be heard online. We went over this when we talked about this. There's a clarification on this. The way to remember this is when you are taking relief and you have finished taking complete relief, you are now allowed to play any way that you want, and you don't have to maintain, in the question asked, the left-handed stroke that you had that got you in the relief. And the way to remember this, and it's 16.1/2, there's a clarification. Each time you take relief, you have a new situation. Once you have a new situation, you then evaluate what your options are.
And last question from online asking, does a player get relief under Rule 15 or 16 for a ball in a pile of animal dung?
If a ball is in animal dung, the first question I would ask is that an abnormal course condition? You got to look at the definition of abnormal course condition. Animal dung, I think the definition of the short answer is I am stumped on that. I don't know. It seems to me that the ball is, if it's stuck in animal dung, the ball is, that's not a loose impediment because it's sticking to the ball. So you're not going to get free relief under 15. The question is, do you get free relief under 16? There is an interpretation dealing with saliva. And I believe that's under loose impediment. And that's page 342. Saliva may be treated as temporary water or a loose impediment at the option of the player. Now, I think saliva, if I understand the question, is the opposite end of the body from what the player asked about. So saliva comes out of the top, dung comes out of the bottom. I guess my recollection or my view would be loose impediment /3 saliva provides sufficient grounds where I would allow the player to treat it either as temporary water or loose impediment. So they would have relief under either 15 or 16. That's what I think on that.
Questions on
Okay, anybody else have a
16?
question? One last thing on that last question that the player asked on the ball and the dung. One of the beauties of the new rules is that it makes the determination of the referee or the committee final. So if this was a WSGA event and I was the rules official and I said, okay, this is my ruling. And then I said, let me check with the boss. And Jeff, Thomas, or Drew said, yes, I agree, they get free relief. That's the end of it. There is no appeal process beyond that. We'll learn this in Rule 20, and the player would then get free relief. All right, 17. All right, we're going to now turn to Rule 17, penalty areas. Let's look at the purpose statement of Rule 17. Rule 17 is a specific rule for penalty areas, which are bodies of water or other areas defined by the committee where a ball is often lost or unable to be played. For one penalty stroke, players may use specific relief options to play the ball from outside the penalty area. There is one significant definition to go over, and it is the definition of penalty area on 353. Penalty area, an area from which relief with a one-stroke penalty is allowed if the player's ball comes to rest there. A penalty area is, and this is the same structure as the ground under repair in the sense that there are certain items that automatically are penalty areas, and then there are other areas that are only such when the committee defines them. So a penalty area. This is the automatic. Any body of water on the course, whether or not marked by the committee, including sea, lake, pond, river, ditch, surface drainage ditch, or other open water course, even if not containing water, and any other part of the course defined as a penalty area. This last part, or defined by the penalty area, gives the committee great latitude to set up the course based on the skill of the players. A good example of this is the Meadow Valley course at Black Wolf Run. We have played the State Open up there, obviously a highly skilled people playing in the State Open. Virtually the whole course, other than the water, all the fescue areas, tall grass areas, is not marked as penalty areas. And so if the player hits it in there and loses their ball, that's life. However, when we played the high school tournament up there, we had both the boys and the girls tournament. The course was marked where virtually every area off of the near rough was tall grass area, and it was marked as a red penalty area. And again, that shows the difference on how you set up a course based on the skill of the individual players and how the committee feels they can play it. A penalty area is one of the 5 defined areas of the course. There are 2 different types of penalty areas distinguished by colors. And as the saying goes, there's many different varieties of penalty areas, but only 2 colors of penalty areas, a yellow and a red. The red area has 2 relief options. We're going to go over those in a minute. The red penalty area has the same 2 plus 1 more, the lateral relief area. If a course has not been, penalty has not been the penalty area has not been marked or indicated by the committee, it's treated as a red penalty. So that's the default. It's red if you just see a pond of water on the course, it's going to be red. Edge of the penalty area extends both up above the ground and down below the ground. This means that all ground and anything else, such as natural or artificial object, inside the edge is part of the penalty area, whether on, above, or below the surface of the ground. If an object is both inside and outside the edge, such as a bridge over the penalty area or a tree rooted inside the edge, extending outside, only the part of the object that is inside the edge is part of the penalty area. This is to be contrasted with ground under repair, where in ground under repair, if it's growing in and hanging over, that part that's hanging over is ground under repair. With the penalty area, the stuff that's hanging outside is not part of the penalty area. Stakes, lines, and physical features. When defined by stakes, the edge of the penalty area is defined by the line between the outside points. What does that mean? That means the stakes are in the area in which the condition for which they define. Lines, when defined by a painted line, the edge of the penalty area is the outside edge of the line, and the line itself is in the penalty area. When the edge of the penalty area is defined by a line or a physical feature, stakes are used to show where the penalty area is located. So again, if you have a red line, it is the line that's going to dictate where the penalty area is, even though you have red stakes in the general area. The red stakes just say, hey, there's a penalty area up here, but it is the line itself that determines it, and the line is going to be in the penalty area. If a committee has mistakenly excluded an area of water that is clearly part of the penalty area when defining its edge, that area is part of the penalty area. When the edge of the body of water is not defined by the committee, the edge of the penalty area is defined by natural boundaries. This probably shouldn't happen. The committee should do its job of putting a red line or red stakes or something to indicate it, rather than just having a natural area that goes down into a river, because how do you know where the quote natural area is? If an open water course usually does not contain water, such as a drainage ditch, the committee may define the area as part of the general area. All right, let's look at 17. Penalty areas, 17.1, are defined as either red or yellow. This affects the player's relief options. A player may stand in the penalty area to play a ball outside the penalty area, including after taking relief from a penalty area. This is a fairly frequent occurrence, and it's sort of amazing that you're called over. Player hits his ball into the penalty area, measures to club length, he drops, the ball rolls towards the penalty area. He now has to stand in the penalty area to make their stroke. And the player says, well, I don't think I've taken complete relief. And the answer is, yes, you have taken complete relief, because you're taking relief for a ball that is in the penalty area. And now the ball is no longer in the penalty area, so that you have taken free relief. This sentence now says that the player may stand in the penalty area to play a ball outside the penalty area. When ball is in penalty area. The ball is in a penalty area when any part of the ball lies on or touches the ground or anything else, such as natural or artificial object inside the edge, or is above the edge or any part of the penalty area. If part of the ball is in both the penalty area and another area of the course, see Rule 2.2c. 2.2c is the rule that gives the hierarchy. If the ball is touching two different areas, you apply the rule is it's then in the penalty area, and then in the bunker, and then in the on the putting green. So if there's a red line on the so-called beach bunker, and your ball is partly in the penalty area and partly in the bunker, 2.2c will say that your ball is in the penalty area. It's interesting because if you're a player you would prefer to have your ball in the penalty area and not the bunker, because if the ball's in the penalty area, can you take practice swings in the sand? The answer is yes, because your ball's not in bunker. All right, 17.1b, player may play ball as it lies in penalty area or take penalty relief. The player may either play the ball as it lies without penalty under the same rules that apply, which means you can take practice swings, or play the ball from outside the penalty area by taking penalty relief. Exception, relief must be taken from interference by no play zone. 17.1e, we'll go over that in just a minute. 17.1c, relief for ball not found but in penalty area. Notice again that the heading of this does not say relief for a ball lost. It says relief for a ball that is not found. So again, if it's known or virtually certain that you hit your ball in and towards the penalty area, and it's known or virtually certain that it's in there, that ball may not be lost because you haven't expended 3 minutes of your time to try and find it, but it's not found. If the player's ball has not been found and it's known or virtually certain that the ball came to rest in the penalty area, the player may take penalty relief under the penalty area rule. Once the player puts another ball in play to take relief, the original ball is no longer in play and must not be played. This is true even if it is then found on the course before the end of the 3-minute search period. So what this is saying is that you say, oh, I know my ball's in the penalty area. You take lateral penalty relief and you drop your ball. If you then find your ball, you've now already substituted a ball, and that new ball is the ball in play. But if it's not known or virtually certain that the ball came to rest in the penalty area and the ball is lost, the player must proceed under stroke and distance. Relief for ball in penalty area, 17.1d. If a player's ball is in the penalty area, including when it's known or virtually certain to be in the penalty area, even though it's not found, the player has these 3 options, each for 1 penalty stroke. These should be familiar. Let's look at the drawing on the next page, 236. So this is drawing number 1. The player hits their ball, looks like from the fairway. They hit it into the yellow penalty area. Player can't play it from there or decides not to play it. What are their options? Well, the first option is you can take stroke and distance. So you can always go back and play it from where the previous stroke spot was played. And again, if it's played from the fairway, notice that when the player goes back, they're going to use that as the reference point, but they're going to get 1 club length, which could allow the player to get a better or a worse lie. The second relief option is the back on the line. Notice that there is no such concept as going back on the line of flight. So when the player hits their ball into the yellow penalty area at point X, the player does not go back on the white dotted line. That's the so-called line of flight. That's not an option. The player then must keep X between themselves and the flag, and then they go back on that black dotted line. And as a reminder, the relief area is only created once the player drops the ball on the line. Once they drop it, you have the relief area. And again, as a reminder, you can play it if it comes to relief, if it comes to rest anywhere within that 1 club length circle, even if it's closer to the hole than where it first touched the course. The third relief option, which is the diagram number 2, 17.1d, the player looks like she's hitting it from the tee, hits her ball into the penalty area. Player has the same 2 options. She can go 1, she can go back to the tee. And remember, under 14.6, when you go back to the tee, you can play from anywhere within the teeing area. Or her second option is the back on the line, which is the same for the yellow. You go back on the, excuse me, the black dotted line from point X, and you can drop there. And the player has the third option, because this is a red penalty area, so they have the lateral relief option, which is 2 club lengths from the edge of the red penalty line, which is at point X. One thing, this is the bottom of 237, when you are taking either back on the line or penalty relief area, notice that the limitations on the location of the relief area must not be near the hole, but may be in any area of the course except the same penalty area. The way to remember this is, generally speaking, if you are taking free relief, you're going to have to drop in the same area that you're taking relief from. If you are taking penalty relief, then you can drop in any area of the course. So in this example, there's no bunker back on the line, but if there were, the player could then drop it in that bunker back on the line. The bottom of rule 17.2, so we're on the top of page 238. I want to call your attention to the committee procedures. Section 8, model rule B2, the committee may adopt a local rule allowing relief on the opposite side of the red penalty area at an equidistance from the hole. The WSGA for 2023 will be adopting model rule B-2.2. And if you look at page 460, let's go over that. So look at the drawing on page 260. The player hits his tee shot and it goes along the white dotted line, goes into the penalty area at point X and comes to rest where the white ball is. Without adopting this model local rule, can the player take lateral penalty relief? And the answer is no, because there is no spot on the course for which they could drop it, because the out of bounds line and the red penalty line coexist. Could the player take back on the line? Yes, technically, and you follow it, and it would be up on the right of that picture. So effectively, the player's only option, if we don't adopt this local rule, is in this type of situation, if the player hits their ball into a penalty area and wants to take penalty relief, their only option is effectively stroke and distance. The thought is that is too much of a penalty for a player that hit it into a penalty area, because when you hit your ball into a penalty area, you shouldn't lose the distance. You should just you should keep the distance, but lose only get one penalty stroke. So in this situation, and this actually occurred on the 14th hole at the Trevino course at Geneva National in the women's match play. This was a fairly good representation. The player hit her ball and it came to rest sort of where that white ball is. And then the player's only option was effectively stroke and distance. But with adopting 2.2, the player will be able to drop on the opposite side, equidistance from the hole, and you can see the 2 club length relief area. So if you go back to the previous page, here's the language that we'll be adopting. If a player's ball is in a penalty area, including what it's known or virtually certain to be in a penalty area, even though not found, the player may take relief using one of the options under 17(1)(d) each for one penalty, then cross out the next language, go to the very bottom of the page, and this is 2.2. Or if the ball last crossed the edge of the red penalty area that coincides with the boundary of the course, as an extra relief option for one penalty stroke, the player may drop the original ball or another ball on the opposite side of the penalty area. So again, the purpose of this is to allow the player to take lateral relief without being forced to take only take stroke and distance when they hit their ball into a penalty area. All right, 17. (17.1)(e). Relief must be taken from interference by no play zone and penalty area. In each of these situations, the player must not play the ball as it lies. Number one, when ball is in no play zone in penalty area, the player must take relief. If the player has interference from his no play zone after taking relief under this rule, the ball must not be played as it lies. Instead, the player must take further relief. So this is the ball in the penalty area and it's in the no play zone. Option two, or parent two, when no play zone on course interferes with stance or swing for ball in penalty area. The player's ball is in the penalty area and is outside a no play zone, but a no play zone, no matter where it exists, interferes with their area of intended stance or swing. The player must either take penalty relief. Why can they take penalty relief? Because their ball is in the penalty area. Or take free relief by dropping the original ball or another ball in this relief area, reference point, the nearest point of complete relief from the no play zone, one club length, but it must be in the same penalty area where the ball lies. And then as typical under the relief procedures, we have parent three, no relief when clearly unreasonable. There is no free relief from interference by a no play zone under number two, when the player playing the ball as it lies is clearly unreasonable because of something from which the player is not allowed to take free relief. You can't get free relief by using a club stance or swing that is unusual. All right, 17.2. This doesn't come up very often, but when it does, it can be very confusing. Options after playing ball from penalty area, 17.2a, when ball played from penalty area comes to rest in the same or another penalty area, and then 17.2b, when the ball is played and it goes out of bounds or it's unplayable. If a ball played from the penalty area comes to rest in the same penalty area, the player may play the ball as it lies, or for one penalty stroke, the player has the normal relief options, under one, and then if you go to the next page, number two, an extra relief option, playing from where last stroke made outside the penalty area. So let's go through these. The diagram, I think, is very helpful. So let's look at diagram number one on page 240. The player is in the teeing area. He hits his ball to point A. He's in the penalty area. He then decides he's going to play it. So he hits it to point B. He then decides he can't play it or chooses not to play it. So what are his options? What this rule says is you have the same three options that you always had: stroke and distance, which would take you to 1. Back on the line, which would take you to point 2, or lateral relief option, which would take you to point 3. But the extra relief option is you get to make the stroke from where the last stroke was made from outside the penalty area. Where was the stroke? The last stroke made from outside, not the last stroke, but the last stroke made from outside the penalty area. And that's from the teeing area in this example. So the player then could choose that. They're going to get 1 penalty stroke. Then look at the diagram on 241. Ball played from penalty area comes to rest in the same penalty area, having exited and re-entered. So the difference between the diagram 1 and diagram 2, excuse me, the only difference is the player's second shot actually went outside the penalty area and then came back in. The effect of that is the reference point for taking lateral and back on the line relief is going to change. Why? Because the rule requires you to use as a reference point the point where the ball last crossed the penalty area, not where it first crossed, but where it last crossed. So on page 241, player hits her ball to A. She then decides to play it. She plays it, the ball goes outside on that white line, it's outside the relief area, and then it crosses back into the relief area as at point X. So her ball is in a penalty area and she has her standard 3 relief options. Number 1 is stroke and distance, so she goes back to position number 1. Number 2 is back on the line, which we've gone over, that's number 2. And number 3 is she gets her 2 club lengths. But she also has the extra relief option, which is to make the stroke from the point where it was last played from outside the penalty area, which in this case, she would go back to the teeing area. The last part of 17.2b, when ball played from penalty area is lost out of bounds or unplayable outside the penalty area. After playing a ball from a penalty area, a player may sometimes be required or choose to take stroke and distance relief because the original ball is either out of bounds or unplayable. If the player takes stroke and distance by dropping the ball in the penalty area and then decides not to play the original ball from where it came to rest, the player may take further relief outside the penalty area. If the player does so, they get 1 more penalty for a total of 2. The last paragraph, and we're going to go over an example of this, is the key. The player may directly take such relief outside the penalty area without first dropping in the penalty area, but they still get a total of 2 penalty strokes. So let's look at page 244. This is clarification 17.2b/1. The player is on the tee. He hits his ball to point A. He decides he's going to play his ball from the penalty area, and he hits it out of bounds. What's he required to do when he hits his ball out of bounds? Stroke and distance. So he's got to go back to point A. What if he doesn't want to play from point A? Does he have his options available to him where it last crossed the edge of the stroke and distance? And the answer is yes. So the player, so let's go through how you count up the stroke. So the player hits his ball to point A. He then hits it out of bounds to point B. Assuming he goes back to the tee, he hits his 3rd shot onto the green and he 2 putts. So when you're counting, if you have this on an exam question, or if you're doing this in real life, I find the easiest way to add up the strokes is not to say he's 1 in, he's 2 out, he's 3 on, he's 4 here. For me, the easiest way to do it is to count up all the strokes that the player actually made. So you count up the so-called talent strokes. Once you've counted up the talent strokes, then you go back and you count up all the penalty strokes. You add the 2 together, and that's what he gets. So let's take this situation. The player hits from the teeing area to point A. That's his 1st shot. He hits it from point A to point B. That's his 2nd shot. He goes back to the teeing area, hits it onto the green. That's his 3rd shot. So they have 2 putts, so the player gets a 5. So in this situation, the absolute minimum the player is going to get is 5. And then you go back and you count up the strokes. The player hits their ball to point A. Is there a penalty for hitting it to point A? No. Player plays it from A to B. Is there a penalty from hitting it from A to B? Yeah, that's the stroke and distance that they're going to get. So where's their ball now? Now their ball is at point A. The player then takes it out and goes back to the teeing area. Are they allowed to do that? Yes, they're making their next stroke from where their last stroke was made, which is an additional penalty. So the player in this example gets 1 penalty stroke for hitting their ball out of bounds, and they get a 2nd penalty stroke for making the stroke from where the last stroke was made from outside the outside the penalty area. So in this example, the player has 5 talent strokes and then gets 2 penalty strokes for a total of 7. Again, when you're adding those up, a lot of people do it both ways. You say, well, it's 1 in, 2 out, 3 here, 4. The problem, if you do it that way, you often forget about that stroke that gets you from point A to point X. So that's why I like to add up the total strokes then add the penalty strokes, and on you go. All right, last section of 17.3, relief under other rules for ball and penalty area. This again is not really a relief area. It just gives you instructions on where you look. When a player's ball is in a penalty area, there is no relief for interference from an abnormal course condition. So if you're standing in a penalty area and your foot is on a drainage system of some sort, you don't get relief. An embedded ball, you don't get relief. An unplayable ball, you don't get relief. Players' only relief options is to take Rule 17. But with dangerous animal conditions, with the play of the ball in a penalty area, the player may take either free relief in the penalty area or penalty relief outside the penalty area, which we discussed under 16 and 17. And that is Rule 17.
If your ball's in a penalty area and there's a sprinkler box, an obstruction, you don't get relief from that.
The question is, if your ball is in a penalty area and you have interference from a sprinkler box I would consider immovable unless it's one that is easily movable. Notice if it's easily movable, then it's a movable obstruction and you can move it. 17.3 says you don't get relief from an abnormal course condition, which would be an immovable obstruction.
So that will be included in abnormal course condition.
Yes.
Okay.
Could you look at the picture on 236? When taking relief from the yellow penalty area, when the player is going back to point 2, can he put a T in the ground on the spot that's on the line and then make his crescent with a club length? Or does he have to drop the ball and then decide, well, I'd rather go club length one side or the other of that line?
The question is on the diagram on 236, the player is deciding to take back on the line relief. They're standing on the line. Couple of questions. Do they have to put a T down? No. Can they put a T down? Yes. But the T has no bearing on where the relief area is going to be, because the relief area is not created until the ball touches, by dropping it, on the line. So if you drop that, if you put a T 2 feet to the right of that, and you drop your ball by that T, you have not dropped on the line. If you haven't dropped on the line, you haven't created a relief area. If you haven't created a relief area, by definition, you are playing from a wrong place. So if you then drop it 2 feet off of that line and you play it, you will get 3 penalty strokes, 1 for taking penalty relief and 2 more for playing from a wrong place.
So you drop the ball first to determine your penalty area.
Yes, you drop the ball because there is no penalty area until you drop it. When you drop it, you create it. What you create is a 1 club length circle, not a semicircle, but a 1 club length circle on which, if the ball then comes to rest anywhere within that 1 club length circle, you have dropped, it's then come to rest in and you've played from the relief area.
And then also on page 460 with the model local rule. With the equidistant, it's equidistant from where it crossed the red line, or equidistant from where you figure it lies within the penalty area.
The question is on 460, that drawing, when you're talking about equidistant, what is it equidistant from? And if you look at the limitations on 459 reference point, the estimated point on the opposite edge of the penalty area that is the same distance from the hole as the estimated point where the original ball last crossed the edge. It's not where the ball lies, where it last crossed the edge. So if you go back to 460, what they're talking about is point X is the magic point, and then point Y is equidistant from the hole as X.
And there's a situation, with 14, 16, and 17 kind of all together in a number of these places. This occurred at Wild Rock a couple of years back in the state playoffs for high school. With the cart pass right next to the red penalty areas and the drop place scenarios, and people getting confused and not doing it correctly. Do you recommend that the red line be put on the course side or the general area side of the cart pass and put the cart pass inside next to the penalty area in those scenarios, or is it better to not do that?
The question has to do with the setup of the course and whether if you have a cart path that runs along the right side of the hole and the rest of the right side of the hole is the penalty area, is it better to have the red line such that the cart path is in the penalty area, or it's the cart path is out of the penalty area? The vast majority of courses will always have the cart path outside. So yes, the player will often have to drop on a cart path, but it's drop plays. Jeff, do you have any comment on that?
That's kind of how we do it.
Okay. Jeff's comment was that's typically how the WSGA does it.
A player takes an abnormal stance to take relief from an abnormal course condition. So he picks up his ball, he takes his stance, he starts taking the relief. And one of his not partners, but one of his fellow competitors says, I don't think that's right. And they argue about it for a while. What would be the procedure there? Would that player then put the ball back to you would replace the ball in that spot? And would there be a penalty or not for picking up that ball?
Okay, I thought you gave the example where they didn't pick it up. The
Well,
players.
let's say he picked it up. He picked it up, and then he's starting to take his relief procedure. And now all of a sudden, Jeff says, Jim, you can't do that. Oh, I can't. And then after a little bit of him and hawing, okay, I guess I can't. And he puts the ball back down where it was.
So the question really boils down to if a player picks up a ball without the ability to take relief because he's not entitled to relief, does he get a Rule 9.4B penalty? And the answer is yes. Is he required to put his ball back? Yes. The more interesting question is, what if the person says, well, I don't care, I'm going to play it from there anyways? Then you would have to make a factual determination as to whether the player was entitled to relief under the circumstances, which could mean having him simulate why he put his right foot 3 feet out behind him to the right and why that was a natural swing under the circumstances. I'm being a bit facetious, but that's the job of a rules official, is that you have to make that factual determination as to whether the stance, swing, or area of play was clearly unreasonable under the circumstances. But it's clear that that's what the rule requires. The question is, was it clearly unreasonable?
With that, we're gonna take about a 15-20 minute break. And then we will resume with John Morissette joining us online for rule number 18. So we'll go on break and we'll resume around 10:45. All right, welcome back, everybody. We will go ahead and start rule number 18 here, and I will turn it over to John Morissette with Rule 18.
All right, thank you, Jeff, and good morning, everyone. With Rule 18, we'll focus on something that Dan touched on with Rule 17, and that is stroke and distance relief. Whereas in Rule 17, we saw that was one option for taking relief from a penalty area. With Rule 18, we'll talk about when the player may take that, as well as when the player is required to use stroke and distance, as well as how to play a provisional ball to save time. So let's start with looking at a few definitions. First, definition of lost on page 343. Provides that the status of a ball that is not found within 3 minutes after the players or their caddy or a partner or partner's caddy begins to search for it, that ball would be lost. It does not become lost as a result of the player declaring it to be lost. And that's certainly a great misconception in the rules, that there's no such thing as declaring a ball lost. I might see players trying to do that when they've played a provisional ball and had a great shot with the provisional ball and would prefer to continue with that provisional ball, but they can't just declare their original ball to be lost. If a player deliberately delays the start of the search in order to allow other people to search on their behalf, then the search time would start when the player would have been in a position to start the search. So for example, if a player and his caddy, player hits an errant tee shot, player and his caddy are walking there, and the player tells the caddy, hey, hold on, let's just wait a minute to give the spectators and volunteers some extra time to find the ball before we get there and before the clock starts, the 3-minute clock starts. So that is not permitted, and the clock would start when the player would have been able to reach that area. Now, if the player begins to search and that search is temporarily interrupted for a good reason, with emphasis on a good reason, or when the player's mistakenly identified a wrong ball, the time between the interruption and when the search resumes does not count. The time allowed for the search is still a total of 3 minutes. So, for example, I hit my tee shot into the rough. I'm having trouble finding it. There's a group on the tee waiting. So after searching for 2 minutes, I wave to the group behind us to go ahead and play through. And then I step aside for safety reasons. That when that at that point, the clock stops for me, and when I resume searching, I would have 1 minute left to find the ball. All right, next definition is out of bounds, which is all areas that are outside the boundary edge of the course defined by the committee. Remember, we saw in Rule 2 that nothing is automatically out of bounds. Something is out of bounds only if the committee says so. All areas inside that edge are in bounds. The boundary edge extends both up and down. So that's important so that, for example, if you have a ball stuck in a tree branch and that tree branch overhangs out of bounds, that means that ball is out of bounds. Similarly, if a ball is in, let's say, a culvert that is out of bounds and is underground, that ball would be out of bounds. Now, if there's an object that's partly in bounds and partly out of bounds, only the part of the object that is outside the edge is out of bounds. And that is can be important with what Dan covered with Rule 16. Because Rule 16 grants relief for an abnormal course condition only when it's on the course. So, for example, there used to be in the PGA, USGA rules workshops, slide of a road sign that was half inbounds, half out of bounds. So if the player's ball is on the course and he has interference from the part of the sign that's inbounds, he could take relief from that. Go on to say the boundary edge should be defined by boundary objects or lines. And when defined by stakes or a fence, the boundary edge is defined by the line between the course side points of the stakes or fence posts at ground level. So, so this is useful to say. So, for example, in local rule sheets, committees don't need to say with fence or white stakes what part of the fence posts or stakes define out of bounds, because it says so right here in the definition. However, when using something else, such as a wall, to define out of bounds, then the committee needs to say what part of the wall defines out of bounds, i.e. whether it's the inside or outside face of the wall that defines out of bounds, just because this definition will not say. Lines, when defined by painted line on the ground, the boundary edge is the course side edge of the line, and the line itself is out of bounds. Something we don't see that often, but a painted line for out of bounds, can be a good idea. While it's more expensive and more labor intensive to maintain, it has the benefit of that one, it won't go anywhere, unlike say a fence post or a stake. And secondly, it makes it very, very clear, and aesthetically, it might not be as intrusive aesthetically. But the line itself is out of bounds. Remember what Dan said, a line that defines something is in what is part of whatever it defines. So if the line defines out of bounds, the line itself is out of bounds. And when a line defines the boundary edge, the stakes may be used to show where the boundary edge is located. When stakes are used to define or show the boundary edge, they're boundary objects, and it's recommended that the stakes or lines be white, but it's not necessary. Certainly, you do come across places, especially with homes bordering the property, where the committee might want something that blends in a little bit more, like a natural colored color or something like that. So, but with the line, with the key is the course side edge of the line that defines the boundary. So, for example, if a white line on the ground is 2 inches wide and a ball comes to rest exactly in the center of that line, that ball would be out of bounds because all of the ball is beyond the course side edge of the line. All right, and next definition, provisional ball on page 355. Another ball played in case the ball just played might be out of bounds or might be lost on the course outside a penalty area. So a provisional ball is a just in case ball. The player does not want that ball to become the ball in play, because if he did automatically want that to be the ball in play, he wouldn't have called it a provisional ball. But it's just in case one of those two circumstances occurs. And last definition is stroke and distance. Again, something we saw in Rule 17. And stroke and distance is the procedure and penalty when a player takes relief under Rule 17, 18, or 19 by playing from where the previous stroke was made. So why the term stroke and distance? Well, because the player gets one penalty stroke and also loses the benefit of any gain in distance. So if I hit my tee shot 250 yards, but it goes out of bounds at the very end, means I need to play again from the teeing area, add one penalty stroke, and I don't have the benefit of any of that 250 yards that I hit the ball. All right, so with those four definitions in mind, let's take a look at the rule itself. First, the purpose statement. Rule 18 covers taking relief under stroke and distance. Now, if a ball is lost outside a penalty area or comes out of bounds, the required progression of playing from the teeing area to the hole is broken, and the player must resume that progression by playing again from where the previous stroke was made. So there, we have, some of the philosophy behind the procedure and the penalty. This rule also covers how and when to play a provisional ball to save time. And as we'll see with the provisional ball rule, there's one and only one reason that rule exists, and that is to save time. The ability to play a provisional ball is a little bit of a complication thrown into the rules, but it's a worthwhile one just for the purpose of saving time. Okay, Rule 18.1, relief under penalty of stroke and distance allowed at any time. Again, a helpful and descriptive rule title there. And whenever the rules use absolute words like at any time, take the rules to mean exactly that at any time is what this means. It's not normally, it's at any time the player may take stroke and distance relief, which makes sense because as we saw in Rule 17, if a player's ball is in a penalty area, one of the player's options is stroke and distance. And then in the next rule, Rule 19, for an unplayable ball, Dan will show us how one of the relief options is stroke and distance. So you combine those two rules and you really have every eventuality. So that means that players always allowed to take stroke and distance relief, no matter where the ball is on the course. So the ball could be middle of the fairway on the putting green, and for some reason, if the player says, I want to take stroke and distance relief, he has that right. Likewise, the player may do so even when a rule requires the player to take relief in a certain way or to play a ball from a certain place. For example, the player might hit his ball in a situation where could be this is a little far-fetched, but could be on a wrong putting green or in a no-play zone. The rules require their player to take relief, and for some reason, the player might say, you know what, it's just better. I'm going to keep it simple and just proceed under stroke and distance, and that's okay. Rare, but okay. Once the player puts another ball into play under stroke and distance, the original is no longer in play and therefore must not be played. And this is true even if, and you'll notice in the rules whenever we see even if, that's there for emphasis for a specific situation that might come up. This is true even if the original ball is then found on the course before the end of the search period. So let's take a look at clarification 18.1/1 starts on page 252. And this will show the difference in the application, with the key being when a ball is in play. When playing again from the teeing area, a ball that's placed or dropped or teed is not in play until the player makes a stroke at it, as we've seen. For example, a player plays from the teeing area, searches briefly, and then goes back and tees another ball. But before the player makes a stroke at the teed ball and within the 3-minute search time, the original ball is found. The player may abandon the teed ball and continue with the original without penalty, but is also allowed to proceed with a ball from the teeing area. So the key point there is that ball, when he teed it, was not yet in play. And since the 3-minute search period has not yet ended, the original ball is not yet lost. So therefore, the player could go forward and play the original ball. But if the player wanted to, the player could could go ahead and play the ball from the teeing area. So let's change the facts a little bit. However, if the player had played from the general area, so for example, with an approach shot, and then dropped another ball to take stroke and distance relief, the outcome would be different in that the player must continue with the drop ball because why? When the player dropped that ball, that ball became the ball in play under stroke and distance. And based on what we just read, that means the original ball is no longer in play. So in that case, when the players dropped a ball, put it into play, the player has to continue with that dropped ball. But this does not apply to a ball to be played from where the previous stroke was made when the player announces he's playing a provisional ball, which we'll get to later in this rule, or is playing a second ball, whether because he thinks he may have committed a serious breach of playing from the wrong place or is unsure how to proceed. All right, rule 18.2. Again, very helpful title. Ball lost or out of bounds. Stroke and distance relief must be taken. And that could just about be the rule itself. So let's talk about when a ball is lost and when a ball is out of bounds. Ball is lost if it's not found within 3 minutes after the player or their caddy begins search for it, as we saw in the definition. If a ball is found in that time, but it's uncertain whether it's the player's ball, then the player must promptly attempt to identify the ball, as we saw in Rule 7, and is allowed a reasonable amount of time to do so, even if that identification happens after the 3-minute search period is ended. And this includes a reasonable time to get to the ball if the player is not there where the ball is found. For example, the player is looking 10 yards away when a marshal yells, "Hey, I've found a Titleist 3 over here." And then the player has to go over there to try to identify it. Now, if the player does not identify their ball in that reasonable time, then the ball is lost. So let's take a look at clarification 18.2A1/3, which is on page, let's see, bottom of page 254, which is a new clarification for this year. Rule 18.2A1 provides the player must promptly attempt to identify a ball that's found when it's believed that could be the player's ball. And when attempting to do so, the player is allowed a reasonable amount of time to identify it. However, so long as the player's ball is found and identified during the 3-minute search time, the player may take as much time within those 3 minutes to identify it. So for example, if right away when the player arrives at his ball, a gallery marshal is saying, here's a ball, I see a ball up in the tree. So the player hadn't yet even started search for it. That means he has 3 minutes to identify whether that ball in the tree is his. But when a ball is found close to the end of the 3-minute search time, it's reasonable to allow the player up to 1 minute to identify the ball. For example, a player finds a ball in a tree after 2.5 minutes of searching and can't immediately identify the ball. It's reasonable to allow the player 1 minute to try to identify the ball, meaning the player's able to identify the ball within 3 minutes and 30 seconds after the search began and the ball is not lost. But if the player discovers the ball is not theirs after the 3-minute search, then their ball is lost with no additional time remaining for searching. Similarly, when a ball is found close to the end of the 3-minute search time and the player is not where the ball is found, this also allows the player reasonable time to get to that location, and once there, up to 1 minute to identify the ball. So a good way to look at it is if a ball is found before the 2-minute mark, then and if the player is right there and can start his efforts to identify it, then the player has up until that 3-minute search period to identify the ball. Where the only wrinkle occurs when the ball is found after that 2-minute search periods, for example, with 2.5 minutes. And the good way to look at it is the player is that it's reasonable to allow the player always to have at least 1 minute to identify the ball in that case. So that 1 minute really is important if that ball is found after the 2 minute mark. All right, next, out of bounds. When a ball is out of bounds. Ball rest is out of bounds only when all of it is outside the boundary edge of the course, such as the ball that's on the boundary line. If all of it's beyond the course edge of that line, that ball is out of bounds. Ball is in bounds when any part of the ball lies in or touches the ground or anything else inside the boundary edge, or is above the boundary edge or any part of the course. So what if the ball is actually resting on the line and overhanging the course? That ball would be on the course. So if we look at this diagram here, you'll see in each case, the third ball from the left, one with the stakes, that ball is half out, half in, a piece of string stretched between the boundary stakes. So that ball is in bounds. And likewise, the ball that's half on the line, half on the course side of that line is in bounds, even if it doesn't physically touch anything on the course. And it's okay for a player to stand out of bounds to play a ball lying on the course. Now, what to do when a ball is lost or out of bounds? Well, it's pretty straightforward. If the ball is in fact lost or out of bounds, player must take stroke and distance relief. There are a few exceptions that we've covered so far to where a player has not found his ball, but the rules still will provide the player free relief. One, if the ball was and these all involve knowledge of virtual certainty, which is important because when you're dealing with a lost ball, often you don't know with 100% certainty what the facts are. But if it's known or virtually certain that the ball came to rest on the course and then an outside influence moved the ball, player does not have to proceed under stroke and distance, as we saw under Rule 9. There is a free relief that is allowed where the player would estimate where the ball was and replace a ball there. Or if the player's ball was played by another player and the player now can't find his ball, as long as it's known or virtually certain that that's what happened, the player may substitute balls without penalty on the estimated spot where that other player played his ball from. Now, secondly, if the ball that can't be found, but it's known or virtually certain that it came to rest on the course and or on a movable obstruction, could be something like a trash can, something like that, or an abnormal course condition, such as a big pool of temporary water. As Dan just covered, the player is allowed to take free relief under that, but if for some reason he wants to proceed under stroke and distance, that's okay too. If it's known or virtually certain the ball is in a penalty area, player certainly may use stroke and distance, but as Dan covered, there are, depending on the color of the penalty area, one or two other relief options that might be more friendly. And if the player's ball was deliberately deflected or stopped by another person, then Rule 11 tells us how the player may proceed. But again, if the player wants to proceed under stroke and distance, that's okay as well. Penalty for playing from the wrong place in breach of this rule is the general penalty. So it's always useful to stop and think that if a player, let's say I've hit my tee shot out of bounds, so I'm required to play again from the teeing area, but instead I tee up and play a ball from 2 inches in front of the teeing area, and I play it, match play, I lose the hole. In stroke play, I've simply played from wrong place. I fulfilled the teen area rule when I started play of the hole from within the teen area, but now it's just a regular case of playing from wrong place, not a serious breach. So in stroke play, it's important to remember that player will wind up getting a total of 3 penalty strokes, 1 for going out of bounds, and then 2 more for playing from a wrong place. All right, now on to rule 18.3, provisional ball. We'll talk about when a provisional ball is allowed and how to play it. If a ball might be lost outside a penalty area or might be out of bounds, to save time, and again, that's the sole purpose of this rule, is to save time, the player may play another ball provisionally. This includes when the original has not been found and identified and is not yet lost. And a ball might be lost in a penalty area, but it might also be lost somewhere else on the course. And this is an important point. You know, we've talked about before, you know, the expression that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, where some people will mistakenly think if the balls might be in a penalty area, the player's not allowed to play a provisional ball. And that is incorrect. Player's not allowed to play a provisional ball solely because the original might be in a penalty area. But if a player hits his ball toward a penalty area, might be in that, but it also might be in the bushes or trees or tall rough near the penalty area, then he may play a provisional since it could be lost outside that penalty area. Likewise, same with out of bounds. If a player hits a ball that might be in a penalty area, but it might also be out of bounds, he may play a provisional ball. And later on, we'll talk about what the player may or must do if it turns out that the ball is out of bounds or is in the penalty area. Now, if a player makes a stroke from where the previous stroke was made with the intent of playing a provisional ball, but a provisional ball was not allowed. So, for example, the case where players playing a provisional solely because he doesn't know if his ball is in a penalty area, when there's no reasonable possibility it might be lost outside that penalty area, then the ball the player is playing is his ball in play under stroke and distance. And that's, you know, among other things, that keeps the player from, you know, trying to get in, among other things, some extra practice shots. So if a player, you know, hits his ball down the middle of the fairway, he can't say, you know what, that might be lost, I better play a provisional and get basically a practice shot, because then in that case, he would be line 3. If a provisional ball itself might be lost outside a penalty area or out of bounds, the player may play a provisional ball, another provisional ball, and that provisional ball has the same relationship to the first provisional as the first one to the original ball. So in that case, a good way to look at it, player hits his first tee shot into the right rough. He overcompensates, hits his provisional ball into the left trees, and he's concerned that both balls might be lost, so he plays another provisional ball and he hits that one down the fairway. So let's go through the variations. If he finds the original ball, then he's set, line 1 with that original ball. But if he does not find the original ball, but does find the first provisional ball, then he's line 3 with that. But if he cannot find either the original or the first provisional ball, then he's line 5 with the second provisional ball. Now, one point to keep in mind with this is, let's look at clarification 18.3a/2. Playing provisional ball after search is started is allowed, and that was a change for 2019. Just something to keep to be aware of, that it won't come up often, especially with the 3-minute search period being fairly tight, but just something to be mindful of. And that is that a player may play a provisional ball uh, up until the point where the 3-minute search time has ended. For example, if a player hits his tee shot out there, searches for a minute, comes back and says, hey, I'm going to go play a provisional ball while y'all keep searching, that is okay. That is all right. If a player is able to return to the spot of their previous stroke and play a provisional before the 3-minute search time is ended, that's okay. Now, if the player does this and the original ball is then found, then the player will continue with the original ball. So the player may play a provisional ball anytime before the original is found or becomes lost. Now, before the stroke is made, the player must announce to someone, it could be usually it's another player, but someone could be that the only person around might be a caddy, that they are going to play a provisional ball. And the reason for this is just to make sure the rules don't require the committee to read the mind of the player. Because sometimes players want to play provisional balls. Sometimes players do not want that second ball to be a provisional ball. So this just needs to make it clear. It is not enough for the player only to say they're playing another ball or are playing again. Again, because that would require the committee to read the player's mind, and that's putting the committee in a bad spot. The player must use the word provisional or otherwise clearly indicate that they are playing the ball provisionally under this rule. So let's look at clarification 18.3b/1 on the bottom of page 256, which go over some examples of statements that do and do not clearly indicate that a provisional ball is being played. But certainly the ideal thing is to say provisional ball. Then there's no doubt about that. Examples of announcements that clearly indicate the player is playing a provisional ball include, for example, Dan might say, I'm playing a ball under Rule 18.3, and that is okay. Even if the other players don't quite know what Rule 18.3 is, they can look that up, and that's clear. Then the next one, I'm going to play another ball just in case. And those last 3 words, just in case, make it clear that this is going to be a provisional ball, that it's being played just in case that original is out of bounds or lost outside a penalty area. Now, examples of announcements that do not clearly indicate the intent to play a provisional ball mean the player would be putting the ball into play under stroke and distance include, I'm going to reload and I'm going to play another. Because in those cases, it's not clear what the player's intention is. The player may very well be intending just to play 3, or he may be intending for it to be a provisional ball, but that's not clear. And that's why that would not be considered a provisional ball. Now back to the rule, 18.3b. If the player does not announce to someone and plays a ball from where the previous stroke was made, that ball is the player's ball in play under penalty of stroke and distance. And, this can be an awkward situation for referees, that it's always tough that, say, you're walking with a group. So you're standing there, let's say it's with a tee shot, you're standing there just outside the teeing area, and a player hits an errant tee shot. So already he's not happy because he hit a bad shot, and then he reaches into his pocket, pulls out another ball and tees it up, and you're waiting and waiting for him to say that that's a provisional ball. And inside you're saying, geez, do I interrupt him? He's already upset. And if I interrupt him, that might make him more upset. What do I do? And it's very awkward, but I think something I've done and makes sense is this, just to say, excuse me, is this a provisional ball? And just about every time the player intends it to be a provisional ball, and he might say, well, of course it is. What else would it be? And, depending on what kind of day you're having, you might say, okay, I'm just want to make sure you're not playing 3. And maybe the player will understand that you've just saved him, or maybe he won't. But that certainly is a point to worth clarifying. But it can be touchy, interrupting a player's actions when he's already not in the best frame of mind. So we say that the player needs to announce this to someone, but if there is not anybody nearby to hear this announcement, the player may go ahead and play a provisional ball as long as the player then informs someone when possible to do so. So this could be a case where, let's say a player hits his tee shot, starts walking forward, and then he sees that, wow, that where he hit it is really an area of deep rough and bushes, and he's not sure he's going to find it. So he hustles back to the teeing area to play another ball, but by this point, the other players and caddies in his group are well ahead, and there's no one on the teeing area. So this allows him still to play a provisional ball in that case. So now the player has played a provisional ball. And with Rule 18.3c, let's talk about playing that provisional ball until it becomes the ball in play, or if it needs to be abandoned. First point is, can the player make more than one stroke with that provisional ball? And the answer is that in certain circumstances, the answer is yes. The player may continue to play the provisional ball without it losing its status as a provisional, so long as the player plays it from a spot that's the same distance or farther from the hole than where the original ball is estimated to be. And that's the key point with this, is where the original is estimated to be. Because if we knew where the original ball is, then, well, one, the player wouldn't have played a provisional ball in the first place. But because the location of the original ball is unknown, the player is going to have to estimate where it is, and that estimated point is going to be the key in applying this rule. Even if the original ball is subsequently found, the key is where the original was estimated to be. But the provisional stops being a provisional when it becomes the ball in play or is abandoned, and then it becomes a wrong ball. So let's look at the diagram on the opposite page for this. That player tees off, hits the ball into the left trees. Then the player properly announces and plays a provisional ball and hits that to point A. So at this point, let's say the player estimates that the original ball is 150 yards from the hole, and ball A, the provisional ball, its spot at point A rather, is 175 yards away. So the player could then play the ball from point A, and then if he goes to search for the original ball and finds that original ball, he will continue with that original ball and would abandon the provisional ball. But if the player plays the provisional to point A, and then plays it to point B, and then plays from point B, and then the original ball is found, well, it's too late, because as soon as he plays from point B, the provisional became the ball in play, and the original ball became lost, because point B is nearer the hole than where the original ball was estimated to be. So that's the key. But this is, again, an important detail of this rule, because the purpose of this rule is to save time. And if the rule allowed the player to make only one stroke with a provisional ball, that has the potential in some cases to take away from the intent of saving time. Next, section 2, when provisional ball becomes the ball in play. The provisional becomes the ball in play under stroke and distance in either of these two cases. If the original ball is, in fact, lost anywhere on the course except in the penalty area, or if it is out of bounds. Because remember that those are the two reasons the player played the provisional ball in the first case. And if one of those two situations turns out to be true, then the provisional ball becomes the ball in play under stroke and distance. So it's the same result as if the player hit his ball up into the trees, searched for 3 minutes, and then went back to the teeing area to play again. So he's going to be line 3 with his provisional ball. So in this case, the original is no longer in play and is now a wrong ball and must not be played. Second case is if the provisional ball is played from a spot near the hole than where the original ball was estimated to be. So if in the diagram, if the player plays from point B, then the provisional ball becomes the ball in play. If the player plays a provisional into the same general location as the original and is unable to identify which ball is which, because golfers have a frustrating ability to make the same swing, same bad swing two times in a row. So if I hook my tee shot into the left trees and I play a provisional ball, there's a fair chance that my provisional ball will be a hook into the left trees as well. So now I get down there and I find both balls, but I had not marked them as I should have, or to some degree even worse, I'd marked them both identically, which is not a smart move by the player. But if I get down there, I can't tell which is which, then this is how I will proceed. If one of the balls is found on the course, and which means the other ball is either not found or is out of bounds, then that ball is treated as the provisional ball, which is now in play. But if both balls are found on the course, then, and this is kind of an interesting and unique situation, the player will choose one of the balls, treat it as the provisional, and proceed. Now, this rule is, a fairly player-friendly rule, because certainly, you could make a case that if both the original and provisional balls are found next to each other and the player can't tell which is which, you could very easily make the case that each ball is lost and the player needs to return to the teeing area playing 5. But this is saying, well, we'll find a middle ground. We won't let the player pick one and say that's the original. We won't make the player return to the tee. So instead of in between 1 and 5, you have the happy middle ground of playing 3, treating one of those as the provisional ball. All right, now let's look at this exception. A player may, so not required, but may substitute another ball under other rules when it is known or virtually certain what has happened to that ball. And this is similar, but not identical to the exception under Rule 18.2b. And you'll see the one thing missing from that is the reference to a penalty area, because we know penalty areas are treated differently with provisional balls. But if the player has played a provisional ball, the player has an extra option when their ball has not been found and it's known or virtually certain that the original ball came to rest on the course and was moved by an outside influence. Dog ran out and picked up the ball and ran away, or the ball came to rest in a movable obstruction but was not found, or an abnormal course condition and was not found, or was deliberately deflected or stopped. Now, if one of those 3 rules applies, the player actually has a choice. The player may either substitute another ball and proceed under that rule, or treat the provisional ball as the ball in play under stroke and distance. Now let's go through an example of that. And the reason this is fair, this is a player-friendly exception in that lets the player do one of two things, is it kind of helps prevent the player from breaching a rule or from getting it wrong. So let's take the case where a player hits his tee shot over a hill. And he says, geez, I have no idea what's over there. I'm going to play a provisional ball. Then he hits a provisional ball down the fairway. So he gets up there, walks over the hill, and sees that from the previous night's rain, there's a very large area of temporary water. And it's virtually certain that his tee shot is in that large area of temporary water. So this play, but he can't find it. So this player has two choices. He could either, one, just go over back to the fairway, play the provisional ball, and say he's line 3 in the fairway, playing 4, or he could take free relief for his original ball from the temporary water under Rule 16, line 1. So certainly in most cases, you'd think the player would prefer to take free relief from temporary water, but in some cases, maybe that's not a great option. Or perhaps even more likely, maybe the player doesn't even know he's entitled to free relief for a ball that's lost in temporary water. So the player might, just out of pure ignorance, just say, geez, I can't find my tee shot. I guess I have to go play my provisional ball. This exception means that the player has not breached a rule by continuing with the provisional ball. All right, final section, when the player has to abandon the provisional ball. So if the provisional has not yet become the ball in play, it must be abandoned in these two cases. Well, if the original is found on the course outside a penalty area before the end of the 3-minute search time. So the original is not lost and it's found on the course outside a penalty area. The player must play the original ball as it lies. Because again, that was not the purpose for playing the provisional ball. So he has to abandon the provisional ball. And notice this includes even the situation where the original ball is found in an unplayable lie and the player wants to proceed under the stroke and distance option for the unplayable ball. That means that even in that case, the player still has to abandon the provisional ball, and if this was the tee shot, return to the tee to play a third ball under stroke and distance under Rule 19, which Dan will cover next. Also, if the original ball is found in a penalty area, or it's known or virtually certain that the ball is in a penalty area. So the player hits his tee shot over a hill to the right, says, I have no idea what's over there. That was pretty wild. I better play a provisional ball. He does so, hits that in the fairway. And then he gets up over the hill and sees that there's a big lake there and that it's virtually certain that his original ball is in the lake. All right, well, first, no problem with having played a provisional ball, but at this point, the player has to abandon that provisional ball. So if he finds his original ball in the penalty area, he can certainly play it. But if he finds it, or if he does not find it, or if he finds it, the player may play it or may take relief under Rule 17, which Dan just covered. And if he does not find it, but it is known or virtually certain that it's in the lake, then the player has to take relief under Rule 17. So in either case, the player must abandon the provisional ball. Even if the player wants to use the stroke and distance option under Rule 17, he would have to go back to the teeing area and play again. Let's see, in either case, player must not make any more strokes with the provisional ball. And all strokes with that provisional ball before it was abandoned do not count. And that's an important point. And, player may have made 2 or even 3 strokes of the provisional ball, but then as long as they were all short of the estimated place where the original ball was, player will disregard all that if he finds the original ball. or if he abandons the provisional ball. Now, a player may ask others not to search for the original ball when the player would prefer to continue with the provisional ball, but there's no obligation for them to comply. Some of you may remember it was right around the year 2000 of the what's now the Farmers Insurance Tournament out at Torrey Pines. There was a playoff between Phil Mickelson and Frank Licklider, and on 17th hole, the canyon to the left then was not marked as a penalty area. It was just part of the general area. Both players hit their tee shots down into it, and then both players hit good tee shots. Mickelson hit a particularly good provisional ball down long and down the middle of the fairway. So he gets down there, looks into the Barranca, and quickly determines, even if I find my ball, I'm probably going to have to go stroke and distance. And, I don't know if I'm going to hit another tee shot as good as my provisional ball. So he yells down there, tells the marshals, hey, don't look for my ball. Don't look for my ball. But, the marshals, what are they're trained to do? They're trained to look for players' balls. So they continue to search for the ball, and they find it, which did not make Phil happy. And sure enough, his only option, he couldn't play it, and his only option under the relief rule, he thought, or his best option, was stroke and distance, which meant going back to the teeing area to play a third time. So he had to abandon that provisional ball. If the provisional has not become the ball in play and a ball is found that might be the original, the player must make all reasonable efforts to identify that ball. And if he doesn't do so, he could be disqualified for serious misconduct. So in other words, if a marshal or another player says, hey, we found a ball over here, it might be yours, the player can't just say, oh, I'm sure it's not mine, and continue on. He needs to make a good faith effort to identify the ball. But certainly within reason, because in some cases, because of the terrain, because of the et cetera, it might not be reasonable to go over and identify that ball. All right, so that is Rule 18. Any questions on that?
Yeah, John, we got one from in the room here.
Okay.
John, the situation where there were two balls, both found to be inbounds, both identified, you have to pick one. What happens if there's a third one there? So also identified, you did hit two provisionals. Do you pick one out of the three as your?
Oh, I see. So a player played.
Hitting four or now hitting six.
So a player played the original ball and also played two provisionals, and all three balls are in the same area, and he can't tell which is which.
Right.
Oh boy. I guess my instinct would be, well, it's the type of thing that the rules obviously don't provide a clear answer for that. So, what do we do when that's the case? Well, as we'll see, which as Dan will talk about in Rule 20.3, we say try to treat the situation in a way that's reasonable, fair, and consistent with how similar situations are treated under the rules. So what would be the most similar result to the kind of the intent of the end of this rule? I would say it would be to pick one and probably treat that as the second provisional ball, meaning the player's line 5. Saying that, hey, that is a better result than having the player go back to the teeing area playing 7, but it's not as good as line 1 or line 3. And I'd be more inclined to say, pick one, treat it as the second provisional rather than as the first provisional. But that's, there's, as we said, this rule does not contemplate that situation.
Okay, so worst case scenario would be you'd have to take stroke and distance and go back again. best case is you get to pick one of the three and say it's you're laying 5, hitting 6.
Yeah, and the options are to pick one, treat as the original, say you're line 1, pick one, treat as the first provisional, say you're line 3. Third option, pick one, treat as the second provisional, say you're line 5, or say they're all lost, go back to the tee, play 7. So which of those outcomes is the most consistent with, the second bullet point? I would lean towards saying pick one in your line 5.
Yeah, I had one other one.
Okay.
A ball rolls out of bounds and comes to rest out of bounds, then natural forces, let's say the wind picks up and blows it back inbounds. Can it come back inbounds after it's been out of rest? It's been at rest out of bounds.
Yeah. If that happens, that would be the player's lucky day. As long as in the meantime the player had not already put another ball into play, but that would be okay.
John, if a player does ask you to stop searching for his or her ball, should you comply as a rules official?
If a player asks you to stop searching, should you comply? The answer is yes. And, and this is a good discussion to have, because at this year's state amateur at Erin Hills, there's the potential for that to happen at times.
John, I do have one from online.
Okay.
It came back on Rule 17, and it kind of touched a little bit on Rule 18 on what takes precedent. Does Rule 17.1C take precedent over Rule 18 if player is virtually certain the ball is in a penalty area and searches for it for 5 minutes, is what he says?
Okay, well, certainly if a player thinks his ball might be in a penalty area, he's certainly allowed to search for it for the full 3 minutes, because among other things, even if he finds it in the penalty area, he can play it, and he may want to, depending on the nature of the penalty area. But the key is at the end of that 3 minutes, if the ball has not been found, we know the ball is lost, which among other things means that the player may not play it, even if it's found after that time. So the key is at 3 minutes, is it virtually certain that the ball was or is in the penalty area? And if the answer is yes, it is virtually certain, then the player could take relief under Rule 17, under using back on the line relief or lateral relief. But if at 3 minutes it's not virtually certain that the ball is in the penalty area, then the player is going to have to proceed under Rule 18 with stroke and distance.
All right, that's all the questions I see for 18 that came in online and here in the room. So, John, thank you for job well done with Rule 18, and I will turn it over here to Dan. Just need a few seconds to switch some audio, but thanks again, John.
Okay, all right, thank you all, and thanks to Dan for covering such a big load today.
All right, hey, thanks, John.
This is Rule 17. I'm sorry, this is Rule 19. We've already covered 17. It's a fairly short rule and fairly easy to go over, especially after we've gone over 17, because many of the relief procedures are the same. Rule 19 is entitled Unplayable Ball. It's a good title, but I like to think of it, and this sounds kind of corny, but I like to think of it as the I don't want to play it from their rule. And the reason I say that is because it is strictly up to the player to decide when he's going to declare his ball unplayable, and he can do it anywhere he wants except in the penalty area, and can do so for any reason, even if somebody else says, well, that ball is clearly playable. Rule 19, the purpose statement. Rule 19 covers the player's several relief options for an unplayable ball. This allows the player to choose which option to use, normally with one penalty stroke, to get out of a difficult situation anywhere on the course except in a penalty area. 19.1. Player may decide to take unplayable ball relief anywhere except the penalty area. So it should be clear to you that if your ball is in a penalty area, you cannot declare it unplayable and proceed under this rule. Your option is to proceed under Rule 17. So an example that they usually give is the player's ball is in a penalty area. It's next to a gopher hole and you don't want to play it. So you measure 2 club lengths and you drop it in the penalty area as an unplayable ball. You have proceeded on incorrectly because you cannot use the unplayable ball rule in a penalty. You have to use the penalty area rule. The player is the only person who may decide to treat their ball as unplayable by taking penalty relief. Unplayable ball relief is allowed anywhere except in the penalty area. And if the ball is unplayable in the penalty area, their only relief is taking penalty relief under 17. The last part about this is you can treat it unplayable for any reason. You don't have to say, well, it's really a bad lie. If you don't want to play it from there, you don't have to play it from there. All right, 19.2. Relief options for unplayable ball in the general area or on putting green. Player may take unplayable ball relief using one of the 3 options in 19.2a, b, or c, and in each case adding 1 penalty. The player may take stroke and distance under 19.2a, even if the original ball has not been found and identified. But, and this is an important but to take back on the line relief under 19.2b or lateral relief under 19.2c, the player must know the spot of the ball. Let's look at clarification 19.2/5. Page 265. I would put all of the yellow stuff I have on this, put a couple stars and say, if you don't know any of the clarifications, this one you must know and you must memorize. It's just that important. So let's go over it. The back on the line and lateral relief option under 19.2 and 19.3 may not be used without finding the original ball, as both require the player's original spot as the reference point for relief. If either relief option is used to take unplayable ball relief with the reference to the ball that is not the player's ball, the player is treated as taking stroke and distance, as that is the only rule that can be used if the player has not found their ball. Example, the player finds a stray ball in a bad lie. I guarantee you 100% this will be on the national exam. There will be 3 or 4 variations of this. Player finds a stray ball in a bad lie, mistakes it for their ball. The player decides to take lateral relief, substitutes a ball and plays it. While walking to play the next stroke, the player finds their ball. Since the player did not know the spot of the original ball at the time the other ball was substituted, they are treated as having taken stroke and distance and did so in the wrong place. What does that mean? Well, the alarm bell should go off and you say, boy, that sounds like 3 penalty strokes right there. In match play, the player loses the hole. In stroke play, the player gets 1 penalty stroke for taking stroke and distance and 2 penalty strokes for doing so from a wrong place. What is the wrong place? The wrong place is if they're taking stroke and distance, they have to go back to where their previous stroke was made from. So let's say that was the teeing area. In this example, they drop it within 2 club lengths or back on the line. It's obviously a wrong place. If the wrong place was a serious breach, and in 99% of the time it's going to be, the mistake must be corrected before making a stroke to start another hole or for the final hole of the round before returning their scorecard. So getting back to the situation on the previous page, 265, the player hits their drive, say it's 250 yards out. They go up there, they think it's their ball, they find a stray ball that they think is theirs, and they then decide that it's unplayable. So what do? They then substitute another ball and they play it. What this is saying is you're going to get 1 for stroke and distance, 2 for improper playing from the wrong place, and you have to correct. What does that mean? How do you correct playing from a wrong place? Well, you have to play from the right place. Where were you supposed to play from? You're supposed to play, when you take stroke and distance, from where the previous stroke was made. Does that mean you have to go back to the tee? Yes, it's exactly what it means. You go back to the teeing area. And how many strokes have you had? You've had 1 stroke that counts. You don't count the wrong place serious breach, but you have 3 penalty strokes. You have stroke and distance, and you have 2 more for playing from wrong. So you will be playing your 5th shot from the tee. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. You gotta know this clarification. A wrinkle on this, which will most likely be on the national exam, going back to the example in the bottom of 265, the player finds a stray ball, substitute, hits it, then goes forward and they find their original ball that's laying there. What is that original ball as it lays there? It's a wrong ball. Why? Because they've properly substituted. They may get penalties for it, but remember that substituted ball is the ball in play. So the player then plays this is my original ball. He takes a couple more strokes, he hits it on the putting green, and then someone says, wait a minute, what did you do? What does he have to do? He has to correct. Understand, he's going to go back to the tee. He's played 1 stroke that counts. And how many penalty strokes has he got? He's got 1 for stroke and distance. He's got 2 from playing from a wrong place, serious breach, and he gets 2 more from playing the wrong ball. So he goes back to the tee and he hits the 7th shot. You gotta know this clarification. I know I've said it 3 times, but you gotta know this one. Okay. Going back to 19.28, stroke and distance relief. The player may play the original ball or another ball from where the previous stroke was made. Again, the cross reference to 14.6. As a reminder, if you played from the teeing area, you go back to the tee, you can play anywhere in the teeing area. If you played from a bunker general area, you go back and you get it within 1 club length. And if you played it from the putting green, you're then going to go back and place it on that spot. That's 14.6. All right, back on the line relief. This is a direct repeat from the previous rule on 17. We're not going to go over it in detail, but notice if you're taking back on the line, you must go back on the line. You have to drop it on the line. You can't drop it 1 inch off, 1 foot off, 2 feet off, whatever. And you do not have a relief area until you drop it on the line. It is the dropping procedure and the ball hitting the ground that creates the 1 club length relief area. And then when it hits that line, the relief area is created. And as long as that ball stays within 1 club length of where it hit the ground, you're good to go. All right, 19.2C, lateral relief. The player may drop the original ball or another ball in this relief area, the reference point, the spot of the original ball, but when the ball lies above ground, such as a tree, the reference point is the spot directly below the ball on the ground. This means that if you hit your ball into a tree that is overhanging the putting green and you choose not to play it as it lies, what do you do for a reference point? It is the spot on the green directly down. You're taking unplayable ball lateral relief. What do you get? You get 2 club lengths. And then, even though you're on the green, you're going to drop it. Why? Because you're taking unplayable ball relief and it requires you to drop your ball. Must not be near the hole, maybe in any area of the course, but if more than one area of the course is located within the 2 club lengths relief reference point, the ball must come to rest in the relief area in the same area of the course. The question I've asked last time I taught this rule is, what if the spot directly above where the ball is lying in the tree, the spot directly below is in the cup? I don't know the answer to that. I think the answer would be the player would place his ball, would drop his ball within the 2 club lengths, would not get the benefit of getting a 2, for instance, on a par 5. But I caution you, I don't know the answer to that. All right, so when the player takes lateral relief, this again always comes up on the national exam, the player hits it into a penalty area, and it's an unplayable ball. He takes his 2 club lengths, he drops it, it rolls just outside, and he plays it. How many penalty strokes does the player get? The answer is not that he gets 2. The answer is he gets 3 penalty strokes. He gets 1 for taking unplayable ball relief, and he gets 2 more from playing a long place. How do we know that? The last sentence of Rule 1.3C4, the very last sentence says, when a player is taking penalty relief, you're always going to get the penalty for that relief, even though you've played from the wrong place. So in other words, the playing from the wrong place does not cap out the fact at 2, but rather you have to also add the 1 penalty stroke for taking unplayable ball relief. So let's look at diagram, 19.2. Player's ball is in the middle of the fairway. She hits it not very well into those bushes. What are her options? Well, first is stroke and distance. So the player can go back to the fairway. 14.6 says she gets 1 club length from the reference point. The reference point is where the ball was previously made, so she gets to drop it and play it from that area. Second option is back on the line relief. The player goes back on the line. Again, it's not the line of flight, but it's back on the line, keeping the spot where the ball lies directly between the flag, going back as far as she wants. She must drop on the line. It is the dropping procedure itself that hits the line that creates the 1 club length relief area. She then must play it from that 1 club length. Her third option is where the white ball is, she gets 2 club lengths on either side. And again, that's the relief area. That's the normal procedure for unplayable ball relief. 19.3b. As an extra relief option, the player's ball is in a bunker for a total of 2 penalty strokes. The player may take back on a line relief outside the bunker under 19.2b. So let's look at the diagram on page 263. The player hits his or her ball, let's say it's hits his ball into the bunker. Decides that it's unplayable. What are his options? Well, for 1 penalty stroke, he can go back under stroke and distance. Looks like, again, the ball is in the fairway. You get 1 club length, no near the hole. Second option, back on the line. They can go back as far as they want, but they must drop in the bunker. Third option, lateral relief. You can take 2 club lengths, no near the hole, but notice that on the to the top of the page, that relief area is truncated because the last part of that semicircle would be out of the penalty area, out of the bunker, and the rule requires you to drop in the penalty area. And then for the extra relief option, the player may take for 2 penalty strokes outside, back on the line, and at position 4. We had a situation at the women's State amateur at West Bend. I think it was on the 15th hole. Player hit it right up against the bunker, just where this drawing on page 263 is. And the player called me over and says, well, what are my options? And so I went through these three options. She wasn't very happy with that, but it is what it is. And then she says, well, I have any other options? And I said, well, actually you do. Now, this is one of the best players in the state. She's not going to take this option, but she asked, so I told her. I said, yes, for 2 penalty strokes. And she started laughing and she says, no, I'm not taking 2. I'm not taking 2 penalty strokes. But you have that as an option. And generally speaking, that option is for less skilled players who simply can't get out of bunkers. And for 2 penalty strokes, you can get out of a bunker. Let's look at clarification 19.2A on page 266. Player may take stroke and distance relief even when spot of previous stroke is nearer hole than where ball lies. Remember, the rule for an unplayable ball is you go back, one of your options is to go back to where the previous stroke was made. You can get some bizarre situations on a golf course where you're in the teeing area, you hit your ball, it hits a tree, it goes behind you, you declare it or treat it as unplayable. You can actually go, quote, forward to the teeing area. But remember, you're playing under stroke and distance. The other one is you have a player has a downhill putt. They putt off the putting green, the ball rolls off the green into a bad lie or in the penalty area. The player may play again from the putting green under penalty of 1 stroke. A few years ago, Tiger Woods was on, I think it was the 13th at Augusta, which is a very tricky putting green. He putted his ball from the back of the hole, it rolled off and into the penalty area. Tiger chose the stroke and distance option. What does that mean? You go back to where your previous stroke was made. 14.6 sub C says if it's on the putting green, you place it. And no presentation would be complete if I didn't somehow slip in the 13th hole at one of my favorite courses in the state, and that's the 13th hole at Economawalk. It's a par 4. The second shot is uphill to an elevated green. The elevated green slopes from back to front. If they put the pin in the front, it's a very difficult shot. So you actually hit a beautiful shot. You hit it onto the putting green. You're 10 feet from the hole. You're putting downhill. You hit it just a tad too hard. It rolls past the hole and it goes down the hill 75 feet to the bottom of that hill. What this is saying is for 1 penalty stroke, you have a do-over. You get to go up, you play from where your previous stroke is played. Is that a better option than hitting your 3rd shot from the bottom of the hill, hoping that you'll get it on the green, hoping that it'll stay, and hoping you'll get it within 10 feet? Whereas by picking it up, you're guaranteed the result of placing the ball from where it previously would be played and playing your 4th stroke. All right. Any questions on 19?
Just one clarification. You're going to take an unplayable, you're using options 2, 3, or 4. You have to find and identify the ball, correct?
I'm sorry, what's 3 or 4? Oh, lateral,
Back on the
back
line.
on the
or out of
line.
bump.
yes, although it's hard,
Everything except stroke and distance, you have to find and identify the ball.
yes.
And with that, we don't have any questions coming in online. So want to thank everybody for their time today. John and Dan, thank you as always for being great presenters. Couple housekeeping items. Our last session, session 5, will take place next Wednesday, February 8th at 8:30. We'll send out a link again, ask everybody to register that's interested in doing it virtually or in person. Last housekeeping item too, If you are not taking the exam and just want to take it or to become certified as an official, if you're not taking it at the workshop, meaning the 100 or the 80, either at the workshop or online, we will offer the 80 question exam here at Golf House. An email will be sent out regarding what you'll need to do that if you want to take it here. But we will offer some times for you to come in, and WSGA staff will proctor that 80 question exam. That being said, again, thank you, everybody, and we look forward to seeing everyone next Wednesday for our last session.